It's Kevin's grandson.
Yeah. Oh, really? I didn't call to we're inquiring about now we're just that as far as you guys were just this team. Voice from the both sides. Honestly, well. I seen tonight.
No, you're good.
There's most. I personally, I'm not.
You know, we've got happy.
Not as bad as it was the first call. I knew. Since Alexandria all the way from.
Three times a week and so.
Thanks.
Yeah, because it's just so.
Going 70 or 80 or 90%, it'll make a big difference.
See, you're not actually watching this part comes all of you, they were giving all your players. It seems like it's just divisive. It's super nice. I guess they have all these witches.
I quit. I didn't.
Well, that's all. Flags, if I got like. And ball.
How's it going?
Good, how are you?
Not too bad.
Was that possible that you lost? Why is that?
I'm happy for that.
He's gonna be there.
We still have flags, right? We still have those flags here, like we're getting out, but they should just there, but. Suddenly change it. Yeah.
It is getting.
I mean, should have. They're back in line, so they're back there until I. But you're never provide us.
Yeah.
Now then, I think they're both different.
Yeah. Really? One punch.
No.
Yeah, I will, like email me or.
Prevent them from not chip and
Yeah.
eggs and the thing.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. But if you can be like. Yeah.
I don't think it'll ever happen again.
Yeah.
But yeah, so. Yeah, I kind of wish I would have done. I said, oh, and I watched it. I was like,
It's on.
This year's top.
I know. So he makes this thing, so I think they were there earlier side.
Abby, do you have any extra of these?
Oh, yeah. More.
Yeah. This is easy to know. I have the one. Sure. It might be interesting.
Oh, I gave one to them.
Oh, you, okay.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. Right, it being right at 6 o'clock, we'll get started. And Joanne, if you could just note roll call, and if you're able, please join us to stand for the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, just like a regular council meeting, we do have open forum at our workshops. If anyone is interested in addressing the council on any city matter, please state your name and address and limit to around 3 minutes.
Hi, my name is Susan Young, 9950 199 Street North. Last week at your council meeting, y'all considered an appeal to a variance. And you all granted that appeal, and I understand that. I understand that, most of us aren't really thrilled with lots of regulations and rules and that seems fairly petty. On the other hand, our state law on variances and even our city is fairly specific on the fact that a strictly economic reason for the request for the variance really is not one of those allowable things. My concern is the precedent that you're setting when the variances are granted less stringently than might be considered. You have another variance appeal coming up next week. And that one is one that I am very concerned about. Is for a long and it's extremely long extension of a cul-de-sac. And basically it's an area that does not have any fire hydrants. It's all on wells. And as we've seen in northern Washington County, it's not when there's an issue. It's not if there's an issue, it's when. I'm hoping that the council will consider maybe another alternative to assist the developer in being able to develop the property, but to give good access to the residents so that there is more than one way in and one way out. I understand the city owns some land, next to Cooley Camp Park, that would be, with some challenges, I grant that, an opportunity for the city to sell some land, which we're pretty good at doing. Maybe pour those funds back into the parks, but it would allow the developer to develop their property. It would be a safe way for residents to have more than one method of egress and ingress, and prevent a future problem. The trouble with variances is they really do, granting variances really does set precedent. And so the next one and the next one and the next one build on the expectations and the policy setting that you all do. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think just for the record, is that appeal the first meeting in May? Has that been set yet or is it next week? We can clarify that.
May 11th.
May,
Yeah,
okay.
We can,
Okay. The other two on here, I believe are to speak on the Headwaters Parkway options. So anyone else want to address the council in open forum? All right, we will move on. So as I mentioned, this is a workshop. This is a less formal environment to be able to have open conversations. No decisions, formal decisions we made tonight, everything will come back to in a regular council meeting. So we will start Headwaters Parkway cost share. Abby, we'll start with you.
I included in your staff report or in your packet, a staff report that just kind of gave a high level of some history of transportation planning. And of course, like about 25-year history going back to the AUAR that was developed for the Southwest study. It was just some background information. For the most part, the council asked to have this, where the developer asked to have this meeting with the council, and the council agreed. And so I handed over to the developer for the conversation. Hand to add staffs available if you have any questions to the process. I said I would advance your slides. Do you want me to? Oh, it's already turned on. Let's say, do you want me to turn that down? Otherwise, there's nothing else that I
Yeah,
have right
do you should we turn the light down?
now. I think it makes it down as far as if
Oh,
I
it is.
turn these down a little.
Don't help a little bit. Go up, brother.
Mr. Rubin, Mr. Dobbs, did
Do
you
you
want
want just to sit here or sit
to
here?
wherever you were comfortable? Yeah.
Okay, Mayor.
Appreciate you coming tonight. Just
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
For having us staff. There's two documents I think that carry some weight in this project, and one is AUAR, and then there's the PUD. And the PUD, in my mind, is more of a fluid plan that could happen, maybe will happen, and we know it's gonna happen, right? For example, the city wants to rezone the area that's multi-housing right now, and I believe there's some commercial or resident or high tech along Headwaters Parkway to the south, right? The things change in a PUD. It's an idea. The other thing that the PUD showed was a, beautiful road from 61 to Fenway. And for the life of me, when I got involved in this piece of property, I could not figure out how that was all paid for. Well, I did figure out there was a grant for it. When I read through this report, there's some things in here that I don't think are
telling a true story, of what the PUD is saying and what the, more importantly, I think is the AUAR. I think everybody in this room is concerned about the safety on the roads and that nobody's gonna get hurt, nobody's gonna get killed, and the traffic pattern and the sidewalks and everything's gonna work. So we're concerned about that as well, okay? I don't think this comes down to a safety issue. I think if there is any safety concern, the speed limit on Headwaters Parkway could be 35 miles an hour, just like it is on the part of Headwaters Parkway from Fenway to 61, okay? Just a side note, my father-in-law lives on Everton right now, or lives on Everton. And with all the traffic coming through that neighborhood, I wish there was a police officer here today. Just to keep me in control. No, just to ask him if there's been any accidents or any issues going on, right? Because he said there's a flow of traffic, that's a 32-foot wide road. And people are, from his opinion, going through great, without any problems. So anyways, let's just go back to our document, if you will, here. Let me just get caught up. So in Abby's document here, it even states, if you go to the second page, and she references this figure 5.2, which I'm not sure where that came from, if that was just a generic drawing, but it states in here that, you know, the parkway be a 4-lane from 61 to Fenway Avenue and a 2-lane facility west of Fenway Avenue. And that's what we're asking for. We're asking for a 2-lane road as the AUAR states that it needs to be. You know, and up above it, the major issues are with the development, you know, are traffic flow. Well, that's always the major issue with any development. And with the availability of 97 Headwaters Parkway, 190th and 180th, and you even have, if there's, for some reason, which I would never figure out, that there's so much volume that 202nd could be extended from Fenway to 61. Okay. But, the sentence that's on this, you know what, I got this little guy. So right in here where it's highlighted in yellow, it states that the turn lanes are necessary at all intersections and locations in order to help and preserve the road level of service and access management. That is referring to those intersections that are shown on this executive, what's it called, executive summary of the AUAR. It's not talking about any other roads. It's talking about Highway 97. My eyes are pretty screwed up right now, but it's talking about Highway 97 and 190th. It's talking about 61 and Fenway and the Highway 97 and Everton. That's what that one sentence is, that says that we need to have turn lanes everywhere. It doesn't apply to an interior street or a minor collector that we're putting through Headwaters Parkway. Okay? And if you guys have any questions, just shoot them out to me, okay? If we can go to the next slide. So part of the executive study shows those intersections where there needs to be turn lanes, you know, and how they should be laid out and designed. And the map to the left is showing the whole area, the whole study, or, you know, the whole area, right? And this is the Headwaters Parkway right over here. But this.
Go ahead. So in the staff memo, they put a very similar graphic, which you guys have, but this one is maybe a page or two further down, and it actually shows graphically the turn lanes and the direction flow of traffic on all of the roads in the quadrant that the AUR picked up. So just for background, and so this is the page we have and we're looking at.
Yeah, this right here is just blown up here, showing where these turn lanes, this is Fenway. So this would be the road going towards the YMCA and 61. They're showing it as a 4-lane. And this, if you expand this out, it shows the turn areas in that area, where Headwaters Parkway hits 61, it shows it there. We just blew up this area that's right by the Headwaters Parkway. Okay,
So Fenway is a 3-lane with turn, with Fenway, that's graphically showing that is north-south, and then the circular areas in the middle show it's a 3-lane road with turn lanes. Headwaters west of Fenway Parkway has a 2-lane graphic. It does not have the turn lanes in the AVR. As a graphic, it shows it is just from east and west.
okay. Any questions on that? Does that make sense?
Following you? Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, probably.
Okay, if we go to the next slide, you know, and the slide to the right, or I guess that whole slide shows everything from 61 over to Elmcrest. Now the site, I believe that the city's moving down on the west of Fenway. The city's expanding the residential or the development area south of there slightly. Is it a 40-acre, I believe? That is not shown on this plan. That would bring it down to 190, correct?
80 acres, so.
Oh, 80 acres south,
Yep.
that Headwaters will eventually, not Headwaters, but the residential area will continue down to 190, which isn't really shown on this plan. Okay? But, when you look at the plan, the city has this area right here. This is the land I believe the city owns, and it's zoned for multi-housing. And I understand that you guys, and the only reason I'm bringing this up is to tell you in a PUD, people change it, including the city, because the city's looking at doing that as a, I don't know, is it a tech area or more of a business park or something different than housing, okay? Am I missing anything else on this, John?
Just that, you know, the other thing that PUD did was, it was from 2005, and so it, like any planning document, thinks about what's gonna happen in the future, and how that's gonna work. Anybody in 2005 saw 2008 through 2013 coming. They're a lot smarter than I was, and most people I think in this room, I mean, nobody saw that coming. The world has changed a lot. It's 22 years in the rearview mirror, so not only are they kind of a planning document of goals or directions, but an awful lot has happened between now and then COVID on top of it. So it's changed the world on a variety of levels. So
I'm sorry, would it be better for you guys if I pointed up here? I didn't even think of that, I'm sorry.
Yeah, we got it from us too.
Okay. And then you can see the Headwaters to the east of Fenway is a similar design, but we don't have a grant to build it, and we can't afford to build it, nor I don't believe it's needed. The other thing is, we didn't find anywhere that specifically stated that it had to be a 90-foot road right away east of Fenway Avenue. We haven't located that in our research. So we are putting in, I believe, a larger than normal road, and that the fact is it's going to be a 32 or 34, whatever, you know, we call it, without any parking or driveway accesses on that road. And this is inside of a residential development. And you have 34 feet to drive 2 vehicles down in each direction. You don't need any more than that. And it's not going anywhere. Can you go to the next slide? And when I say it's not going anywhere. So this area is the future connection of Headwaters Parkway, which connects onto our site here, okay? This is the area, all this pink, I believe, is an area that the city's looking to acquire to, am I yelling? If I am, I apologize. That the city's gonna acquire for a wetland banking, right? And if you go further down this study, they talk about having 1,500 houses. And when I read that, I'm like, holy buckets, there are gonna be a lot of homes right on that Headwaters Parkway. Well, it's not. If you can show me the next slide. The actual area that they're talking about that these 1,500 homes are gonna be in is from Highway 97 all the way down to 180th from the county line, if you will, or Elmcrest to 61. So it's that whole huge area, not just the little area that we're proposing our development. Based on number of units we're able to get per acre, because even though this piece of property that we bought has been farmed for 100 years, there are still wetland pockets, even though it's been continually farmed, they still find, the watershed will come out and say, okay, you have an area this big that's a wetland. So even if the city, after you buy all this wetland and take the remaining acreage, you're gonna be lucky if you're gonna get 400 more units in that whole quadrant over here, not 1,500, which is a huge difference in that traffic calculation or count that is gonna be on Headwaters Parkway. The other thing is, where Headwaters Parkway is proposed to come out now is gonna be right into a wetland. There is gonna be nothing here. And south of 190th, there's, I believe it's 12 single-family homes mixed in amongst all of that wetland back down below there. I don't foresee how anybody would ever buy all 12 of those homes and try to redevelop that area into anything different than it is today. It's just economically, there's no way that would make any sense. So I think there's a misconception on the traffic volume that this site is going to generate. The other thing is, you know, we're all talking about what's going to happen in the future. When Elmcrest is installed and Headwaters Parkway is installed and 190th is installed and 180th south there is installed, you have 4 different corridors that you can go east and west from 97, Headwaters Parkway, 190th and 180th. And I don't know anybody in this room, if you had to pick one of those 4, the last one you would pick the Serpentine Snake running through a residential area. You're gonna take the fastest route. If you're coming up Elmcrest and you wanna get over to 61, you're gonna take 180th or 190th, or you're gonna go to 97. And the few people, let's just say, if there is, but there, I mean, here's the deal. This little area, right? This is where the road is, right? So if you're there, there's 190th, right? So the only area, I mean, you're not gonna back up, you're gonna go up to 97. There's such a small amount of people that are gonna be in that location to generate the traffic to go to the east. The traffic volume on this. I drove up and down 61 several times just as a test, which is most of the way is a 2-lane road from White Bear to Forest Lake. The traffic on it is almost constant all day long. And if you look down Headwaters Parkway, you'll be lucky if you see 3 cars. So even today, there isn't any traffic on that road. So the idea that we need something larger than a 32 or 34 foot wide road doesn't make sense. I mean, it doesn't. There won't be the households anywhere near to exceed that of a typical 32 or 34 foot road. We won't even be close to it. There's no way to put those there. Again, that whole Taz area, do you understand? It's how big of an area that's covering. It's not our little pocket of our development in that corner. I think, did I miss anything?
I don't think so. I just summarized it briefly also by, so in the Taz area in the north, Paul did Summerfield, which was
452 units.
Yeah, we've looked at this for a couple of weeks now, knowing that it's coming, and Abby, can you roll up to the slide of the area where the wetland, yeah, thank you, not that perfect. It's not very good there, it's a little better there, but reading the legend down below, you guys, I'm assuming the council all knows where the pink area you're trying to acquire, this is what's south of 190th.
This is 190th right here.
And so all the green is national wetland inventory, I believe, if I got that right, based on what the graphic shows. So that's all wetland. And then the new road alignment that was just talked about, approved at council in December, is the black line. And so if the grant acquisitions are appropriate, then it's nowhere near. You can see how much land is actually north of 190th with the wetlands that are there. And Fenway is the line down the right there. That's all the unit count we're talking about putting on Headwaters. The other thing is Headwaters is built to the entrance of Hidden Creek North already. So really what we're talking about is any other units that are south of the current terminus there's no way it gets to be an overwhelming amount of rooftops. And then,
Wait a minute, just one more thing to that. So this Headwaters Parkway is coming into a swamp, which there's nothing there. In my little brain, this intersection where Elm Crest and 190th is gonna be more of a major intersection than this is. And John doesn't know that I should even bring that up. I think there's an existing road right here. I don't know why the city wouldn't run this to tie in to that existing road. I think it's Enrich Enfield that goes south here. And the other question is, the city's gonna own all of this land right here. Who's gonna pay for this section of road that butts up to that wetland? And I guess I don't wanna bring that up.
the only other thing I'll say is that, as I think all of you know in the background, there's been, a lot of agreement to disagree about this project over a fairly long period of time. And, so when we came with Hidden Creek South, I tried to find a different paradigm to interact with the staff about some of these things we disagreed with. Paul's been talking about the road width since 2023. I've sent emails, we've all talked about it. And so instead of pushing that boulder uphill, we thought, or I suggested the best way to go about it was, instead of fighting about, is this road overkill? Is it too expensive? Is it fair? And all of those other things, Forest Lake policy, we understand. Just ask for the city to pay for the oversizing and just bypass the argument. And try at least to have that. But what Paul's talking about, 34, 32 foot back to curb is what he's been advocating for since I started working for him in 21. So this isn't a new dialogue. This is an old dialogue. It's been going on for a long time. And we've heard about the AUR and the staff and all of that, and I appreciate and respect their point of view, but it's just the floor, in my experience, is development is that collectors are paid for by the landowners and by the city because it benefits more than the property that it's connecting to. It benefits all the other people, and you spend all the time talking about the AUR. Staff talks about this in your meetings as well. This is going to be a road that serves all the property of the south. One of the property owners is sitting right behind us now. It has a bigger benefit than just our land. And that's somehow missed in the floor of the conversation. We're already agreeing to pay more than what is typically our fair share. Forest Lake policy aside, and I understand you've had it for a long time, and I respect the city's policy, but it serves more than us. And the water, if we have a bigger water main than 8 inches, we get credit back, oversizing for future development. We have sewer and it's bigger than 8 inches or whatever the standard is, we get credit back. Or if it's deeper than it needs to be to serve other properties, we get credit back. And there's a formula in the developers agreements that we signed that has done all of that. But somehow the road is a different dialogue, probably because of money. Same as it is for us. We all wish it grew on trees and it doesn't. So these are tough conversations and we understand that. That's just kind of the context how we got here.
And just one other thing, I've been telling staff since I got involved in this land, that Headwaters Parkway was never gonna go out 185th. 195th. Well, it's not going on 195th, is it? They have to move it because it's all wet right around that area. And I've been talking about that for at least 4 years. So the other, safety, there is no safety issue. We have plenty of room. It'll be plenty safe on this 32-foot wide road. There's a huge impact because of the wetlands that the city's buying that's taken off the table. About 100 acres, I believe it is. And if anybody cares remotely about affordability, there's a huge savings of putting this road that goes to nowhere, not putting it in. It serves absolutely no purpose. So thank you. And if you guys have questions, we'd love to hear them.
Also, any thoughts, questions?
I read through the packet, but there's a lot of information in there. Abby, do we have easy access to the packet you sent out that we can pull up and
Yeah,
just?
it's up on here, yeah, that first tab. Oh, perfect, yeah.
There's something specific
But,
that you're looking for?
well, the opening comments, I mean, what is the AUR call for? West of Fenway, is it 4 lane, is it 2 lane?
It's 2 lane.
It's 2 lane.
The AUAR does have a blanket statement that lanes are required at intersections. Developers saying that those would be the major intersections that they show in their presentation. It says, out of the AUAR, figure 21.8 or -8, where it just shows those. Let's see here. Right, where it just shows the lanes going each way.
Yep.
But staff would at least just assert that east of Fenway, we did also include those turn lanes. It is customary to have turn lane funding. On a roadway.
And if I could just add, where Headwaters dies, whether it's into Elm Crest or 190, there should be turn lanes at that intersection on Headwaters Parkway. I would agree.
So,
I'll answer your question there.
yeah, it did, so. What's the issue on the top of this table, is it a 94? Why 34?
Your staff is telling us, the only way we could get here today was to draw a plan showing a 90-foot right-of-way roads.
The future plan of Hidden Creek South is actually 100 feet. And we were told that it needed to be 100 feet, our engineers were, and it had to have a trail on both sides. The PUD graphically in the section shows 90 feet, not 100 feet, and it shows trail on one side, but it's not very clear to me because of the nature of the graphics of the PUD, that there's actually a hunting license for those two things, but in the first phase, it was 90, right of way was 90 feet. Correct. The first Hidden Creek, it was 90 feet. And it was 90 feet on the PUD from Pratt as well.
And then we had to acquire the other 10 feet.
I think that's right. I'm not looking at it, but. Well, we did it 100 feet, we did trail on both sides, and we did the parkway on, as I said, and then asked the city to pay for the to stop having the headway.
So there's I think what you're asking, why are we here? So the real question, or the real thing is, I believe that you only need a 32 or 34 foot road on the rest of Headwaters Parkway. Because of the lack of units, because of all the wetland, you know, all the reasons I mentioned. The other option would be, which is not what I would prefer, would be is if we put in this road that the city feels the staff is pushing, for the life of me, I don't understand it. That the city pays a third of it, which I don't think we should. I think we should put in the 32 to 34 foot road, which is going to have more than enough capacity to serve the small amount of units that are gonna use this road.
South of where Trimble is.
Yeah.
So, couple things. On Headwaters 123, which was residential and it still shows us here. What was that rooftop count? Do we know? Because I'm assuming you're gonna have a lot more, if we are, and that is the plan to be more commercial, it's gonna have less traffic, I would think, than a couple hundred homes of 3 or 4 cars coming and going on a regular basis. So the reason I'm asking is I tend to agree a little bit that Headwaters does seem to be just overbuilt. I mean, this was something that was 2003, 2005. You take out those homes, you take out the 100+ acres of that we are through a great DNR grant that we're gonna purchase. That seems like less rooftops there. And so I tend to agree that it seems to be overkill. And I wonder if the city was gonna be doing this, it was gonna be our money. Would our take on this be the same as we need this type of massive road with 190th and some other crossways getting over to Elmcrest, which we're just in a study mode now. Who knows when they're ever gonna do it? I mean, it's gonna be years before anything happens there. So I get why we're having this conversation, so why you guys are here. I know some cities share the cost of this, make good point about the larger water and sewer lines, and we're gonna build that to accommodate other parts of the city, benefit of the city. There's some, credit back to that. So Apparently, we don't do that with our roads in a policy, and so I think this is a good conversation to have. I want council's full feedback on this. I'm also a little bit challenged with the decision, and I kind of pushed back on it probably more than most on council about the new direction that we made that change. And I don't know if that, when staff was contemplating that, if it was based on the idea that we would be securing that property, so we would go along the north side of that wetlands or JD4. And it's a good question, then are we paying for that? If it's now city-owned property, are we paying that portion of Parkway? I would suspect we would have to, at least half of it. So there's just some general questions for council and staff to talk about and consider. So I guess the first question was like the number of rooftops on Headwaters 123. You know what that was?
I don't know, I would have to look.
But it's substantial, right? I mean,
It was exclusively to be residential and has been rezoned. It has rezoned prior to even being kept. So I could take a look to see if I can find information.
Do you know how many acres that area is? City owns? Huh?
100.
Okay, so it's more dense than a residential, single family home. So if you're gonna say 6 units per acre, you're not gonna get 600 homes in there, but it's probably more like 300-400 houses in there. If it's townhomes.
And single family.
Oh, and single family, so that might be high. So say you're gonna get 400 houses or 350 in there. Again, you're gonna have to deal with the wetlands. Even though it's hay or whatever you're doing with it, the watershed's gonna still find wetlands in it.
But yeah, it's probably bigger houses. So density required, probably dictate that.
So this was something that 2003, 2005, right? This was the plan based on just different densities that we're dealing with than we were back then, I would assume, or what they were contemplating what might happen.
So this whole southwest area was an area you would have developed over time, right? That's why the AUAR was completed. Upon that completion of the AUR and talking about the traffic counts and housing and a bunch of other things in there, you know, transportation is a key thing of the component of the AUAR. Over 20,000, close to 30,000 annual trips were anticipated. Would that change if some of the zoning changed in a portion of that? Yes. Is zoning potentially change back again? I don't know what your next comp plan with Headwaters 123. But it's going somewhere. And it's a long-term planning vision that was supported by 2-year comprehensive plans and an AUAR. And that's going to a road that's anticipated by the county to be a Class A minor arterial. And just best practices and standards in the industry of planning and transportation planning, you would want a collector, which Headwaters Parkway is designated as a collector, major collector, to connect to that minor arterial. And that arterial is so important that Anoka County EDA has an RFP out right now solicited a major corridor study that's anticipated to be finished in March of 2027. That's
For Elmcrest?
Was that?
Was that for Elmcrest?
Yeah, Elmcrest.
Yeah, for that north-south Elmcrest, not east-west.
Probably gonna be some realignment in that corridor. That's gonna be your frontage road to I-35. So if you don't think vehicles are gonna come off Highway 97, go south down that future arterial and turn into the parkway. That's why you did this whole planning stuff back in the day, so we didn't have to sit here and justify and argue that. That's where those trips come in, both that future arterial, Highway 61. 190th probably is gonna be very constrictive because it's already developed and you got the wetlands on both sides of the road, so. This is what's been identified in your AUAR is your roadway to serve all the development that's development, I say.
Okay. Is that appropriate for me to talk?
Yeah, this is an open.
You're telling me that 190th isn't gonna be a major, what did you call it, artery?
So that it's a major collector as well.
Right, so Yeah, I totally disagree with you, Ryan. 190th is gonna be used, once it's developed, way more than Headwaters Parkway. Just use common sense, put yourself over there. You are literally, what, 1,300 feet where Headwaters is coming out right now on Elmcrest. You're 1,300 feet from 190th. So it's all there. I mean, if you're on 100 or Elmcrest and you've got to go north or south, you're right. You might pick up those people that are 600 feet north or south of that are going to actually go Headwaters Parkway. Everybody else, if they haven't moved off of County 4 or 180th or 190th and go to 197, they're not going to have their. Why would you do that? I mean, if there was the Metropolitan Center over baseball or at Vikings football stadium and you were coming across there, I would agree with you. There's nothing over there. Headwaters dead ends at 61. It doesn't even go east of 61. Well, no, but here, you guys are dying the sword on this thing. And I've been doing this for a couple days. It doesn't make sense.
And west of Fenway is what's being proposed to build is a 2-lane road. And as the AOAR started in all the comprehensive plans, it states that turn lanes should be constructed at intersection. Why do you have the 2 lanes on that one diagram? Is because nothing was constructed yet in the time that AUR was completed, and that's defined and talked about in the AUR.
So
The other stuff was already constructed. So that's why they have the other arrows.
well, there's
So at that point west of Fenway, they didn't know where intersections would line up because that detail did not exist at that time.
okay.
Yours, flats coming forward have provided that detail. And that's why we required a left turn lane. Left turn lane only. At those intersections that are within your Headwaters 1, 2, and 3 area and your Hidden Creeks out there.
You're requiring it now, I believe, 100-foot road to be put in our neighborhood, which is not needed.
The AUR didn't talk about 10-foot trails on both
100
sides
foot
of
right
the
away.
road.
What's that? I'm sorry.
The AUR didn't talk about 10-foot trails on both sides of the road.
I never saw a graphic and I tried my best.
That's
I
the
didn't see it.
PUD, that's the
Even the
concept
section
the
that showed
city has
on-
adopted. They want a 10-foot road trail on both sides for connectivity in the neighborhoods to get you to more major destinations by bike or pedestrian. Think you got the Hardwick Creek Trail. You're gonna eventually, the minor arterial is gonna have a trail leading up to the Highway 97. Then you down to, it's a connectivity thing.
Yeah, and Highway 97 has a sidewalk on one side. Highway 97 goes down to 2 lanes, except for at the major intersections. So you can't tell me, I mean, just the traffic flow that's on Highway 97 has got to be astronomical. Yet it goes down to a 2-lane and it still functions, and it's 55 miles an hour. You heck, drop this down to 30 if that's what you need to create that a 32-foot lane is gonna, the traffic is not gonna exist. There's no way you can convince me that the traffic is anywhere gonna convince on Headwaters Parkway. No way.
And we're building a two-way roadway.
So how wide is the 2-way roadway? It being required, what, as it says today, what's the requirement or
To add those sections that are in the plan. Areas of the parkway with no turn lanes, and a grass median. Actual width of the pavement across a typical section is 26 feet. Width of face-to-face curve across the entire section is 48. So actual pavement within that area where the grass medians exist is 26 feet. The black part,
That's out of the PUD, right?
that's right out the
That's
plans,
out of the PUD, I'm sorry.
out of the plans, or Headwaters Parkway.
Oh,
I mean, our plans that we submitted,
These are the plans that are built with the parkway that extended to your first phases 1, 2, and 3.
oh, yeah.
yeah, oh, yeah, but that's what we're saying. You don't need that anymore. Yeah,
Well,
okay.
and then the areas where there's turn lanes and concrete median. The actual pavement width across that area is 42 feet. When you got a turn lane. So the areas where there's no turn lanes and they're just driving down the road. Your blacktop width is 26 feet.
but you have 26 feet, I mean, so you're 13 feet.
Then you got
A
curb cut
median-
on both sides. of that.
Yep, you have a third, so you have a 13-foot road, a big concrete median and another 13 feet, so you have, you're basically driving on 13 feet. Right?
The concrete median between the lanes, or is it a grass median?
In the grass median areas.
So 13 here, grass 13.
There you go, your trail, 10-foot boulevard. And then you got your curb, which is 16 feet face to face, but then you take a foot and a half off of that, so that's 13 feet of pavement, just like you said. And then I go grass median, and then on the other line, which is 13 more feet of pavement on the other line. So that's total of 26 feet wide in the grass median areas.
Right.
And then the areas where I have a turn lane come into an intersection, that's when you get up to 42 feet of actual blacktop.
So if you do a 34-foot road, you have approximately a 15-foot drive lane for each car. So you have more drive area.
If you did a 34-foot, you face to face, back to back, face
Back
to
to
face,
back.
You can say back to back if you want.
well, then you would take 3 feet off that.
So you'd have 31, so you'd have 15.5 feet of drive lane for each north or east-west, each side.
So that
So
was,
you'd have more drive area.
that'd be more driveway area that you just asked for.
What's that?
That'd be more bituminous area.
But
than what
it's,
I
yeah, but
said
it's a
was-
smaller road right away, and it's gonna be way less expensive because you're not gonna have to build all that extra concrete curbing. The cost of that road is significantly more expensive than what is needed.
That curve on the inside of the boulevard on the median on either way, if you do concrete, you got concrete for it, you've got price per acre that the land was paid for in the first place, plus removed from the ability to plat the land going forward. It's, and I understand that from staff point of view, economics, our economics isn't the same, isn't something maybe that people think a whole lot about, and I respect that. You have a different hat to wear than we do, but it also comes back down to the long-term city budget. Abby, can you go back a slide or two that shows the big black line with the yellow outline area that you guys are using for the study area for the new road? I'm sorry, I'm on my slide, yeah, thank you. 1, 2, 3 down, right there. So, and I've spent an awful lot of time looking and reading PUD and painfully the AUAR. There's 11 pages in the AUAR, I believe, about traffic that are much more detailed than the executive summary. And it's chapter 4 something, it's 50 pages into the AUAR. So the executive summary just kind of summarizes big intersections, how I read it. I'm not a transportation engineer, but I did take the big areas that they were talking about in the AUAR, and I blacked it here. And I think to Paul's point, what I think he's trying to convey, what I think I heard Ryan talk about as well, is that once this road infrastructure is built out, the black line in the middle is 190th. The one on the right is Fenway, the one on the left is Elmcrest and Ormsby. And above it all is 97, to the right is 61, and down below is 100, right? If you live in this quadrant of yellow where the new road is going to get realigned some way, somehow, and the city's trying to acquire property through grant, if you're trying to get to Highway 61, or you're trying to get to Hugo, or you're trying to get to 97, or wherever you're trying to get, if you live in between the pink and the aqua, which is really the area we're talking about finally this thing getting right there, you're at best, even if people coming off 97, like Ryan was talking about, if they're coming down the S curve of Armsby and Elmcrest and dropping south, and for whatever reason they're going southeast, they're not going to hop on the parkway to go back northwest or northeast. They're going to go down to 190th and cut across. I don't see how that end of the parkway serves anybody but the people who live there, and people who live there are going to want to get off onto the black lines anyway. I just don't see how the parkway provides, in this particular area, provides anything other than access for the people who live in it. I don't believe it's gonna pull people from anywhere else. Maybe I'm missing it, Ryan, but I just don't see what you're talking about at all. I see what Paul's talking about, because that's how I drive, and I think that's how everybody in this room drives. if you live in your house and you live here, you're trying to get to 97 or 61 or 35. Or get to Hugo, because 35 is backed up, we're talking 20 years in the future, the intersection is gonna be packed. Drop south, you're gonna go down Elmcrest to do it because Fenway doesn't go with it. You're not gonna hop on the parkway to go kitty corner to where? The ball fields, the airport? That doesn't make sense. So I don't understand the overreaching nature, but I think what gets lost is there's real cost to extra right of way, extra curb, extra real estate, all of that stuff to make a collector that Forest Lake policy with respect, developers pay their own way, but a collector serves more than just us. We're just trying to find a way that's not so much all on us. And a suggestion would be you pay for part of it, another suggestion would be shrink the road. But what we hear back from staff with respect to Ryan is what he just did. This is why you need to do it, this is how it ought to go, and that's where it ought to be, and I respect that, he's been doing this a lot longer than I have. I don't have the skill set he has. But I do and have seen this in a lot of other places, and it's Paul's money. And it's not Ryan's, and you know, and it's your tax base, so I just wanted to come and throw out your cents out.
And this does have a huge financial effect, so if affordability has any driving force in this, it's a huge number, this road, how this affects us.
Right, could help me better understand. I mean, I know conceptually what you mean by a collector road, right? It's a main drag. But from a size standpoint, what makes a collector road special? If it's got a grass median between the drive lane versus what they put up on 97. That
Well, when comparing just open sea of payments, you know, you could do all pavement if you want, right? Or the city has followed the concepts that they have a vision for what this was gonna look like. There's a parkway, right? It's not uncommon, just go south down Havel. On Nika or Nika, probably pronounce it wrong. You guys ever driven that?
Yeah.
Same concept, just south of here, go over to Blaine, same concept, go over to Coon Rapids, same concept, every community you go into has a parkway through a residential area. It's to help with mobility and control, intersection and access and safety. And it serves the development that it's been generated. So.
Can I
still have that vision of what was in that PUD? I don't know.
The turn lanes are important for safety
on a 35-mile-an-hour road,
and movement of traffic.
Yes.
And the vision that the city had when they designed that parkway was for people to be out and walking up and down those walking paths and those sidewalks and those bike trails. And people to feel comfortable walking their pets and their dogs, their cats, up and down, whatever they're doing on the sides of those roads.
no question.
And the traffic was designed on the parkway, like most parkways are, to continually move traffic. And if you don't have turn lanes, then traffic stops and backs up and there's more chance for accidents. And so that's one of the reasons why the turn lanes were put in. Plus, our vision from the city years back was we wanted this beautiful parkway. And that's what the vision was. And that was the vision, and that was on the plans when you guys came in and applied for your permits to develop your land. Nothing's changed, except now, for some reason, because of whatever it might be, you want us to pay for part of it. Because you don't think it's needed, even though the city's vision is we want it.
Then you should pay for it.
But when you applied for your permits and you applied and submitted your plan to develop your land, the planning commission, I was on the planning commission, Mr. Larson was on the planning commission, Ms. Young is here. That was all on there. Nothing has changed from the time you guys applied for that plan and we gave you the permit to start building, except today or recently, you don't want to pay for the cost of it. But from day one, you should have figured that cost because it was on that plan.
Okay, that's not true, because your plan has changed, it's changed substantially. For example, the city has rezoned their area that's supposed to be multifamily housing.
That's nothing to
benefit
do
the
with the
city.
breakaway where you're at.
But wait a minute, they did it for a financial reason to help benefit the city. The road alignment of Headwaters Parkway has also changed because it doesn't go through the middle of a wetland.
But-
No, please hear me out.
Yep.
Because if you're coming down Elmcrest you're heading south, let's say on Elmcrest, okay? There's a 90-degree turn that sends you straight east.
Correct,
That's where Headwaters Parkway was gonna go,
right.
right? Because of the cost the city would have to bear, they're not gonna put it there any longer because of the wetlands on both sides. That road would have maybe made sense to tie into Headwaters Parkway, because now you're coming down Elmcrest, you're already going east, you keep right on going through Headwaters Parkway. Now, we're not doing that. We're having to take another right-hand turn, so we have changed the plan. The plan does not go to that 90-degree turn. Now we're going south again. I don't know how many feet it is, but you're literally, I don't know, 1,600 feet from 190th, which is a straight shot. So I disagree. The plan has definitely changed. And you're gonna have a huge expense. You guys are gonna pay for half of that Headwaters Parkway to go alongside your waterway that you're buying. So yeah, I disagree. I think the plan's changed substantially.
There's some other minor ones that have changed, serve the first 125 lots, it was a 90-foot right of way with trail on one side. We were told that going forward, it had to be 100 feet. There's no graphic that I've seen anywhere that says it's 100 feet. Even the sketches in the PUD say 90 feet, but now it's 100 feet. And I've read the graphics, and I am a landscape architect by education. And I don't see anything in there that's definitive one way or the other about trails on both sides. I see multiple sections that show trail on one side. In the PUD and in the AUR, it talks about distance and width of trails adjacent to particular kinds of road being 6 feet or 8 feet or 10 feet. But it's always singular, it's never plural. And it doesn't show it graphically plural either that I can see. It's not in writing. So there are things that are not 100% black and white being adhered to. And with all respect, because I used to do a lot of this kind of stuff back before the real estate the meltdown, and all kinds of things have changed in 22 years. And it's so much more expensive to do everything that, and the city doesn't have a trail fee and doesn't reimburse for trail. So that's just money out the door, right? And we put it in the first phase, but now it's being told in Hidden Creek South, we have to put it on both sides of the street, and we have to give up an extra 10 feet. If it was a 60-foot right of way for a normal collector, there would be 3 or 4 more lots in Hidden Creek South. And so it's not just the road cost, it's also the land going away for right of way. And I understand, and I can hear it in your voice that you feel really strongly about this, and I respect that. But at the same time, in reverse, it's not black and white. It's been a series of gray issues since day one. And it isn't, I don't believe, that simple, and I with respect disagree.
The other thing, Abby, can you bring up the drawing that shows all the colors of the road? The roads. I mean, if we have grants to pay for all this stuff, that's awesome, but the plan shows that this is a split road, just like this part of Headwaters. So it hasn't been built up to here that way. This graphic shows that Headwaters Parkway was gonna be built with the big same expensive green median that we have here, which you got a grant for. My name isn't Grant and I don't have a grant. I mean, I can't, you guys, the cost that goes with this, I just repeated myself.
So,
Can I just make
Go
a
ahead.
point of clarification, at least on the east portion of the parkway east of Fenway? The developer did pay for the north leg and the ponding in the green space. The city only paid for that south leg, so that was done by the developer.
So the developer paid for probably,
All of the stormwater improvements in the 2-lane right away.
well, but he got the benefit for the stormwater, correct? I mean, that was his, that's where he put his stormwater. So we're paying for all of our ponds in our development as well. So.
The other thing about the Abby was that on this graphic, the light blue and then on the north of Headwaters Parkway, which I believe is difficult to see on that one, a little easier on that one and that one. Those were the road widths that we have in Hidden Creek North, correct? The blue on the left-hand side.
Right here. Right here.
Talked about narrower streets. There's also some blue south of Headwaters as well, right there and up on the frontage road for narrow streets. And we did do a little bit narrower streets in the north, but we were informed by staff that although we could pick up 2 of the roads coming out of Hidden Creek, all the stuff in the south had to go back to the traditional back of curb to back of curb which is what, Ryan? Width-wise?
34 feet back. by-
Thank you. So there's another place PUD isn't being carried forward. It was, but then now we're being told we have to do that, a little with wider roads all through the development.
We're picking and choosing, but everything we're choosing is a hell of a lot more expensive.
So, question for staff on this trail, so can you clarify or confirm that at one, there are a little bit, two trails, a trail on each side, then a portion we're not, then we are, is that really what we're doing here?
So on the first phase of their development of Hidden Creek, the city required a trail on the north side of the road because that's the portion that's being developed. We are requiring it on the south side of the road as well for that two-lane connectivity. Wasn't required as part of their first phase because they weren't developing space, but now they're developing on the first phase. In Hidden Creek phases 1 through 4.
But our first phase only shows, the first extension that we did of Headwaters Parkway only shows the sidewalk on the north side, correct?
Trail, of course.
A trail on the north side because you weren't developing on the south side of the road, that
But
you
we're-
weren't developing those lands.
Is there a trail from Fenway to the,
From Fenway to the front of
So
the English.
he's saying when that other side's developed, there'll be trail on that side too? Okay.
Right, whoever. quoted it.
Yeah, I mean, so council way back had big vision on trails and we can't afford to maintain the trails we have now. That's my concern too, is we're gonna have double trails on a road that honestly, our trails are in horrible conditions. We don't have the money, not put enough money aside for it. And so that's just another thing I think council has to be aware of, that yes, whether or not city participates or not, but we are stuck with the long-term maintenance of this massive road and these trails. And that is a long-term cost going forward to the city, to the taxpayers.
I would agree with that. Sorry if I could interrupt, or add to that, but I would like to see trails on both sides because in this area, we're getting we want houses, we want young families, and that's what people want. People want trails, people want connectivity, and I think that's been part of our goal too. So it's weighing the pros and cons of both of those. I would prefer both trails on both sides. For the
So-
families.
so if we did a 34-foot road and we put trails on both sides, everybody's happy. Except for Ryan.
So I get that then leads into on a major parkway with trails on both sides. Is it truly just the developer that has to pay that? I can go back and forth on that because that is gonna benefit not just these neighborhoods, but all the neighborhoods that are gonna be on along this parkway. And I assume, I don't know how much more you guys plan on developing where it's south, but that's just I guess, a policy question. I know what the policy is, but this is a different, there's nowhere else in the city that's required this. This is different than any other development or any other area in the whole city that I'm aware of. And so that's why I think this gives me a little bit of pause, I guess, and
I could add to that too. I would say with the trails, I don't think that the city should consider paying for that. Because I think that is part of the connectivity, part of the look of this area, part of why people want. I just personally think young families want connectivity. Families want walking space. They want that green area. So I would hate to set the precedent for trails that the city would pay for that. Now, when it comes to us closing that parkway and closing the median, I'd be more inclined to that. I'm not saying that I'm in favor of that, but I'd be more into hearing people's thoughts on that. But I don't know, I'm torn on that too, just because that's what the plan was, that's what the studies have said, that's what we have wanted, and historically what the city has wanted for that look of this area. And I think people enjoy that too, it's not concrete everywhere, and I think that would go to also that look nice and go well with what we're trying to do south of there with Trinity Ford. It would all tie in together,
Cause that will be kind of like a park area.
exactly.
Can I
Mayor
just-
Robert,
Go ahead.
I just want to at least remind the council, the EDA as part of the Southwest area study, when they were looking at the roadway alignment, also did draft regulations, a policy for the city to consider in terms of infrastructure basing. That hasn't been brought back to the council. We've been working through a lot of different development things, but the intent, both the planning commission and the EDA made recommendation, you consider it. And what that policy looks at is for select collectors, 180 and 190 and Harrow, to be looking at the potential for reduced roadway construction at the time of development. However, preserving land area sufficient for roadway expansion in the future. This might be one of those circumstances where the council may be favorable to a policy of that nature of allowing, similar to maybe what we've done on Fenway, where we do have asphalted, but when Fenway gets redeveloped, it may end up being divided. Is that correct, Frank?
We do not have anything in the comprehensive plan that talks about parking.
Okay, ignore my statement about that.
Oh,
But a 2 lane to a 3 lane. So this might be one of those times where the council could be favorable with looking at a reduced here and now construction, but planning for the future. The thing that I would just encourage you to consider is the decisions that we're going to be making about these larger roads now are going to set precedent for every other larger road construction. And we've heard that the new road construction in these undeveloped areas is coming at a cost to the development community and of concern. And I know that the development community is watching probably at home this conversation to see. It might be something that the council's favorable to talking about a reduced here and now design, but also approving that future redesign. It's just something to consider as part of your conversation.
In a current or future comp plan potential, is there anywhere else in the city that has this type of a parkway contemplated that you're aware of?
No, because we have not master planned an acreage like this. You know, this is a 20-year-old, big vision. We haven't done that necessarily for other areas of it.
You have another designated major collector, which is the extension of 210. From Bridle Pass area over there to Carroll Avenue. Which would come in on the north side of Chestnut Creek Phase 1.
Off of Chestnut Creek.
Those we all left in, the leftovers with their median, right? Down that road.
It doesn't talk about a parkway in the comp plan. No PUD concepts have been submitted, master plans for that area. It's designated in your comp plan based on zoning, traffic estimates, stuff like that, though. That's your next other major collector.
Right, it's right.
Can I respond just to Councilmember Valento? Right. You said this was the plan that the envision, but PUD is really the only thing that shows that this road is this expensive road. The AUAR shows it as a 2-lane road. This is, in Brian, PUD is a wish and a prayer, and as you know, you change it. Cities change it. There's already been changes on this plan. So to say this is the plan and then only pick and choose the certain things and then hold on tight to the other ones, I don't think is fair. But the AUAR, which is actually factual studies and research on this, shows it as a 2-lane road. Not a 2-lane road with turn lanes, not a 2-lane road with a big center median, a 2-lane road on the diagram that we just showed it had up there from that executive summary of the whole AUAR study. So out of the two, the PUD carries less weight than the AUAR study, in my mind.
Real quickly, legally, the opposite is true. Just so you guys know, a PUD has the legal authority over property, right? And the AUAR is more of a guiding document. from a legal perspective.
So then how do you change a PUD like we
You have
have?
to go in and get a PUD amendment, right? So that's why when the plats have been, when new phases come in, and if it's not meeting the rules of the PUD, I don't care if it's lot size, road size, setback size, whatever the thing is, right? Whatever the rule is that is established by the PUD, in order to change that, that requires a PUD amendment. The AUAR does not have that same level of authority over a specific piece of property. So legally, opposites.
That's a great point. When the PUD was done, was it one landowner that had control over all of the acreage and,
No, it was not. The city partnered with Fenway Investments, who did the PUD, and at that time, Fenway Investments worked with the Taylor family who owned the property west of the parkway to include those lands as part of the overall.
so the land that we're talking about was included was the developer of your partner, I guess, for lack of a better way of saying it. Where Hidden Creek is, where Pratt's neighborhood is, what goes south, they control all of that.
They did not, I don't believe they had a controlling interest. I'd have to go back and look at whether or not they had an actual legal agreement or if the Taylors just signed off.
Because
No, I believe they had Chris Taylor's property under contract.
I do, but I don't.
And
don't know that right now.
And, sorry, thank you. That's south of this line, right? They were in the PUD, Pat's property. So, they had it under contract, whoever they were, I don't. And then they were getting entitlements on land that they ended up closing on, right? So I hear what Amanda's saying, but they also did it while they had property under contract, they didn't close on them. They were talking about property rights and layouts for land on the hope that they would get through it. That's what happened and they didn't. So I understand.
No, it's to say, I mean, if I'm understanding things, I'm trying to keep up. West of Fenway, according to this map, is a 2-lane, but that's what's being proposed as well. It just, it's 2-lane with a median.
And
with
turn lanes.
turn lanes. Turn lanes at every intersection.
At the intersection, it's just a left turn lane.
Okay, so, this has been good. This has been good. I know one of your concerns, has been when the change of the parkway, the route of it's changed. Can you speak a little bit to that? Is that still a concern or I know you, as far as when we changed the direction, we moved further south, right?
Well-
Original one,
Yep.
because there's a resident here that reached out to me and like to speak to that a little bit as well to the council, so maybe this is a good way to transition to that.
Well, do we have a plan that shows where exactly the proposal? The one plan showed that Headwaters was gonna now go south from 195th, kind of go out in the middle of Elm Crest, where the swamp on the other side. But I believe the way that went, it actually went at a 45-degree angle. No, through paths, no.
You can pull it up. Oh, yeah, so there's a lot of rivers here that impacts the most, but now it drops south along, yeah, so the original alignment was, and you may recall from the presentation that staff made when the selection was chosen, they kind of outlined all the wetlands, which are black outlined on this one. So the northern one is 195th, which was originally what we were told was gonna happen. We've been talking about that since 22. And now the new alignment, I believe the council picked and has, I don't know, approved it or authorized it or what, but the one on the south end that now goes on the south end of your property.
It goes on the entire length of the east for 40 parcel and the entire length of her south for 40 parcel, as well as the safety curve.
And then the curve is all in there, 40 as well. And then I'm sorry, I always forget the property owner.
Walls.
Walls. Family.
So that would be 192nd, 193rd. I don't know what it would be. 195th is the black line on the north, 190th is the next 40 down, so 192nd and a half.
I mean, so I'm not sure what you're asking. I guess one of the diagrams showed that if it's gonna go just like that, I guess and it has to go out to Elm Crest, I don't know how else you would do it.
So,
You know,
so the point where, Councilmember Miller talked about, you knew what was coming. Was that more agreeable to what the current, now what the new changes? Well, the
Because
other,
when you signed all the, like, to, again, to his point, when you got most of this, that was what we were gonna do, it was gonna be that first, the
Yeah.
northern one.
it was gonna go right through here, which this, right?
Original.
Originally, and then this would have been tied right into Elm Crest, and then you'd go up north to, what's it called? The big gas station, Love's, up to Love's. So now, though, you're gonna come down, you gotta make that 90, you gotta make this 90. Now you have to make, if you're gonna go to 61, well, do you go here, or do you go down to 1,300 feet further, or whatever? Few hundred feet further and take 190th over. You said 190th, Ryan, is gonna be a collector?
Yep.
Okay, and that's gonna be a 2-lane road. 'Cause I think I saw somewhere in the report, is there a possibility that it could even be larger, because they're right away? No, that's not.
I believe the UAR had indicated a 2-lane, but to be for a larger road.
Okay, that's what I,
Well,
okay.
one of the things that we talked about for alignment of future headwaters, we talked about all along is that, the wetland delineation that Bolton Mink did in front and showed everybody and was done. I actually did a graphic one in 23 based on our wetland delineations on the property to the north, and still have the graphic, showed it to Mark S., the administrator, and they're pretty close. But we just always assumed and always knew that if the policy was you pay for your own way, the road that we were paying $1 billion a section for was going to end at the end of our 20 acres. It was not going anywhere else because there was no development going to happen on either side of that road. And that was the discussions that we've had for a long time. I believe that Ryan understands that. I believe Abby knows that as well. And we've just been having that dialogue. And that being said, transportation corridors and all the other stuff they talk about. Then we start talking about, well, if we could realign it going south, from a development point of view, it makes a lot of sense to just run the property line due south. Rayvine owns the 80 acres there. Pat owns the property there. There's another property going south of there. So from a development point of view, if it runs down the property line, then it's pretty easy for people to pay their portion of the road, and development happens in a kind of an orderly fashion. If it hooks this way, the burden ends up unduly on her 40. And because there's a lot of road, if the policy is development pays its own way, that ends up being a land cost to the developer. That is exactly how developers look at it. They look at it and go, okay, if I can only get 20 acres out of 40 because 20 is wet, I'm not paying the normal rate for all wetland because I can't use it. If I have to put a huge road on my property, I'm not paying what the going rate for real estate is because I have to put all this road in. And then, so one of the things we talked about for a while was shrinking it down, bringing it to 290. Paul talked an awful lot about that in the neighborhood meeting that Abby and Ryan held in this late November, I think, late November.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and Paul talked about realigning the road down to 190. It's just an observation. It's not really on our real estate. We don't have any control over anything south of our property line. It just seemed to make more sense to us. Yeah.
Okay, so I think maybe it's a good transition. Two others that signed up on here were Katie, Patricia, Scenery. And I don't know if you want to come up. I don't know if you guys keep.
We'll get out of the hot seat. We'll do that.
You can share with me. You've made a lot of points already.
Yeah, and if you just want to state your name and address.
Yeah, sure. I'm Katie Cerny, CERNY. My address is 4625 195th Street. That's the 40-acre parcel we've been talking about that is owned by my mom, Patricia Cerny. We really have the biggest concerns about the rerouting and the direction of the rerouting. Because as you've heard other people say, it does place a huge burden on one 40-acre parcel. And compared, just, my mom's a retired daycare provider. She's lived in the city of Forest Lake for 25, 26 years now. And this is her entirety of her stuff. So this has a big impact on her. She's not a farmer who sells developed land or land to development over and over like some of the neighboring properties are. This is her home. So when we look at this, this is the realignment obviously has a huge impact on her. And if you look at topography, it's also upland acres compared to a lot of the surrounding. when you look at the Rice Creek watershed and who's impacted by the ditches, almost her entire, she's never notified about anything because her property is upper ground. So when you talk about wanting to develop and build houses, you're taking land from the probably best developable land and smacking a road on it. So when we were invited back in November, I was out of town, but landowners around were invited to give feedback on the alignment. But then after that, it kind of went quiet. So all these proposals and approvals happened without notification, without chance to come and speak at a public hearing. So we're really happy and proud and glad to be able to come today, although I just learned about it on Friday. So I put together just a couple of pages. I didn't know there would be slides up here. Most of what we've been talking about is the same stuff, which is it's a massive road intended to be an east-west corridor, but now it's being rerouted over almost 2,000 feet more south. So you're adding an extra almost 2,000 feet to this big, large oversized road. And the way that it routes also takes up again that extra land. We hear and respect the concerns about the wetland, but I've also heard conflicting statements from watching some of the videos of council meetings. It seems like there's some other reasons of like, hey, we don't mind if the road goes through or next to wetland. I don't fully understand it, I'm not an engineer. I know there's a lot of complexities and dynamics, and I applaud city staff for doing their best to try to navigate it all and try to save us taxpayers money. That is greatly appreciated. But it just feels like this is a miss. I can't quite see the logic in the full reroute and adding that much extra length. I think, you know, there are different projects that are happening. I know that there's this, people talked about the Elm Crest, Hornsby, cross county line, cross city projects. Well, part of that, if you flip back to that other wider map, you know, they talked about the 90-degree jog as you go down Hornsby, and then it's 145th in Anoka County, Columbus, and then it comes south and turns into Elm Crest Lions. And then if you were to go straight across on 145th, that turns into 195th when it hits Forest Lake. That's our privately maintained existing road through that wetland that no developer wants to build through. There is a road built there. My mom built it back in '98 in order to build her house. So there is a road easement, 66-foot easement there, and that is where the existing privately maintained road is. So, yeah. You can see on the far left of that screen.
There's your house.
Yeah.
And there, you know, for sure. Don't hit anybody in the hand.
So this right here is Hornsby. This is what goes up to meet 97 at Love's. This right here is 145th Street. Thank you.
I was trying to show love, there you go.
Okay, so if you go just a hand slightly left, there you go, perfect. So this is Hornsby. This is 145th. From this point on is privately maintained road coming to my mom's house where we live. If you were to kind of draw this diagonal right here, you can see hidden, well, you almost saw it for a second there. This is where, right somewhere in here is where the current leg of,
To your right, slide.
just right there.
Yeah.
There we go, thank you. So again, here's where we're talking. This jog, so this is part of that Elm Crest, Hornsby corridor project. This is gonna have to get solved somehow. They're gonna have to find a way to connect these two roads. To me, rerouting it just compounds that problem rather than maybe finding a solution where you know there's gonna be something that happens here to figure out to connect those two. Why wouldn't you connect the parkway and involve that? There's gonna be funding for creating that connection. Maybe there's funding to connect that up with the parkway. And then you have major road coming to major road, not like to a minor road. And there is wetland, but there's also wetland down with the judicial ditch. So that's all there. One other thing too, I know that you guys talked about and did the wetland acquisition study. And when I looked at that, that was actually the the acreage that you're going after right now was actually the second priority. One of the higher priorities was the wetland that connect into the judicial ditch 4, and I forget which branch number it is, but it was this property. So again, my mom owns this 40-acre parcel here, and there was water, the ditch, judicial ditch runs here. And this was actually marked as a higher priority, and that's land acquisition that was passed over for the ones in favor of the branch 2, I think it is in the south. But I just wanted to throw that back out there that maybe there's something here too. Again, I don't know how the funding works. But is there something that could align here with the trail, the parks, etc.? I also know that with the ditch 4 work, I saw some of the schematics of the parkway next to the trail, next to the ditch with the water thing. But when you think about it, I've looked at some of the environmental studies. They say don't put a major collector road next to nature preserve parkland, because that can have negative impacts on the actual preserve, what they're trying to protect, those animals. So again, I wouldn't try to connect those two together. And in fact, as a resident who loves the trails, who loves running and walking on the trails, take my dog out, you don't want to be next to a big parkway. You want to be, if you look at what they did in Shoreview around the Shannon Lake, the Snail Lake area, where you're walking on the trails next and behind the houses. That's my favorite place to go outside of the city. Because it's quiet, because you can see. My favorite part in the city is a little connection between, I think it's 202 and I forget where it snakes around in the development, but there's this tiny little trail that goes between the houses that connects there. It's like stretch of, I don't know, maybe not even, it's probably 2 blocks long, but it's so cool because it's nature. It's next to the ditches. It's just the cutest little trail. I would take that over sidewalks next to cars, next to parkways and traffic any day. So just something to think about.
Anything to add, Brian?
Yeah, just so we're all on the same table here, where the JD4 study was done, in cooperation with the Rice Creek Watershed District. There were 3 separate study areas, right? Northern area, which is where Hidden Creek phase 1, 2, and 3 have already developed. So development was way ahead of where the city was obtained funding and could really do something substantial in that area. So that was kind of scratched off the list. And JD4 north portion of that, that was just reference. And the JD, some that you saw on the screens earlier tonight, that's the middle portion that was studied, and that's become the priority area now. There's also another area in South Bay here. But obviously fund that's been obtained will not be able to address that. One thing that's coming up, like I referenced before, is that corridor study that Dunker County EDA is being. If the classification of Elmcrest Hornsby does fall within a Class A minor arterial road, that road's not leaving 90-degree turns. If it doesn't come out of that studying year and it's a different road classification, then maybe there's more curvature left with that road, you know. But you can't sit here, you gotta acknowledge that if that's truly comes out as it's been talked about in comp plans and other documents, that's a Class A minor arterial frontage road of I-35. Those curves are coming. Yes, that will impact properties. That'll be identified in that study between now and March 2027. So we'll know that those results in a year of that study. This is a major corridor, so this is big firms chasing this RFP. A lot of stuff's going on, and so just I want you to bring that up too, right?
And if I may, adding where the Headwaters Parkway is currently the preferred option too, it's gonna come up right to the Houle Preserve. And just, it's less than like half a mile, 1/4 parcel, quarter of a quarter south of where that 90-degree lockjaw is. And then you got 1/4 of a quarter, so another 1,300 feet or whatever, give or take. Then you have 190. So you're moving it like interruptively in the middle. So to me, that's option 2 just makes 0 sense. Anyway, look at it. It adds line facts, cost, adds maintenance. It goes north, south, not east, west. And it dead ends at a preserve without connecting to anything natural. Not to mention burdening one landowner significantly with the significant portion of upland acres that can add density. That said, one other thought we had was, you know, there are other options. If you bring it, I know time, it's always a game of time and what plays out in a year or so, but if it continued the way it currently does, there's still upland acres on the property directly next to us. And we had shared back with the city, hey, what about these other options? You've got options 1 and 2, but what about 3 and 4? And there are different ways to route that would, again, not overly burden one property owner, could still avoid wetlands and still remain even flexible for staging for when some of the rest of this is gonna become more known. It could still go down and meet where you guys want it to come out. But it doesn't have to do that in a big north-south. It can be more gradual, or it can have, at least it would have options. Whereas now you have to make a decision, is it gonna go south or not?
Mayor Roberts, if I could just add that part of the decision that's brought to you when you're looking at a preferred alignment was the forest or the Hidden Creek South plat, which did show the right of way going due north on that section line. This wasn't entirely just something that staff had conjured up. It was partially because of a plat that was submitted that showed an alignment, north-south alignment.
And I can't speak for the other property owners, other than I know I had briefly talked with Matt Rabine, who owns the property that would split. And I can probably safely say he doesn't want that big, huge road on his land either. So I think having the right communication opportunities is very critical to make sure that we are in the loop on what's happening and have the chance to speak on this.
Yeah, I mean, brings up a lot of good points. I know that. So what you're saying, Abby, is based on what Paul and John brought forward, that kind of helped, that dictated why it was going more south than.
It wasn't entirely dictating, but it was one factor that staff brought to the council at that time. There are, you know, a prevalence of presence of wetlands on that northern route. Just the ability to be able to achieve the right of way on those northern property lines might be a little trickier. To pull it away from those Crest 90s was another concern of staff's. If we're moving in that direction, we're getting there before Crest is ready because of the concerns of those 90-degree angles. But then also, yes, Hidden Creek South had come forward and shown the right of way due south. Those were some of the factors we brought forward in looking at that further. The one other factor that gets kind of brought up is that alignment with the JD4 and the possibility for the roadway getting pushed some onto those potentially acquirable lands. That is in alignment with the grant agreement to allow for access roads or roads on those potentially newly acquired lands, should they still be in.
That area south of JD4. That designates different future land.
It is a different.
That's another.
To buffer the residential portions of the.
As we're looking through east-west collector roads, it does seem to make sense to try to space that out instead of being so close to 190th, which is going to be another east-west. So I was kind of struggling with this new direction. I think I was more vocal about it than the rest of council, and so I see all these make really good reasons. I don't know how we land on the one that affects the least amount of people and how it works the best, but what is for timing wise, where you guys need to be, and maybe there's some way to, like what Abby was talking about, where just part of the parkway, so we have some more time on some of this stuff. Maybe we don't have as much time till, is it March 27th when that study will be done on Elmcrest? Is that what they're projecting? Like, is there a way we can still help to continue to have some development happening, but yet not commit to the exact way until we know more about that study on Elm Crest.
So we're in a development review process on Hidden Creek South. We've agreed to extensions through mid-June. But we do have an active preliminary plat in the area. That is in alignment with that second preferred alternative when it comes to the parkway. I appreciate the council's maybe direction to go back and talk with the developer about reduced roadway requirements for the here and now. But I think we're gonna get into probably the same conversation Paul, John, Ryan, and Dave and I have been having for the last number of years is how big's the right of way gonna be? And those are things that staff would maintain that we'd like to see, and they've shown in their plat, but now would like to change. So I think that there are options that we can go back, sit down and talk about it, but hopeful we could get somewhere. I don't know if right away when there's something that we are finding agreement on.
Just one thing though, I think it's a good idea to have the road split the property lines, because then they're gonna have access from both. I mean, if you weren't acquiring all that land for the people, they would want that road to go down the property lines, so they both have access to their house and then the people, Grapevine's piece, right? So, and I don't know, are you acquiring all of Grapevine's piece? I don't believe you are.
At the moment, we are not acquiring any pieces of property, so it's just something that we have the ability to do. But that being said, I think the question of whether or not we are willing to extend the parkway in a true north-south fashion from here to 190th, staff would maintain that isn't something that we believe that the city should be doing.
So if you bring it south in that upcoming PUD, kind of stuck there, and it's gotta either make a 90-degree or go south, and that's part of the problem. I see.
But I don't, their ability to. I don't think that's a negative for your town. I think it's going.
Well,
I agree with Paul. It's not necessarily a negative for those future development if it goes straight south. But if it curves to the west, then I can see the concern that's straight south.
But true or false, you can bring Musa without having a parkway sized road.
I don't.
If you're wanting it to continue, and forgive me again, not a developer, just done my research. If you want land to develop, you just need the Musa sewers infrastructure to come. You don't necessarily need this big, huge monster oversized parkway.
Correct. We do need collector roads for our neighborhoods to get out of their neighborhoods.
But difference being, the size of the road doesn't have to be that big parkway.
But the developers would put those roads in as they plat their property.
But to answer your question, yes, you could have a 60-foot right of way versus a 100-foot right of way.
So in theory, the parkway could
That's why
still
we're here. We're
extend
trying to.
straighter east-west and still have a smaller road north-south. That achieves the same goal of bringing development to those adjacent parcels. True?
The comp plan and the AUR does contemplate a road heading north-south along the section line off of the parkway.
Okay.
All right, hour and a half plus into this thing, which was good to have these conversations. Any thoughts, staff, on next steps? If anything, do you want some more direction? Do you want us to say tonight, hey, we're not willing to entertain any talk about the cost share, downsizing the road, any of that? Is that direction you'd probably
I think
want?
we need direction given the developers asking to contemplate these items. You've employed us, we work for the city to
Yeah, well,
implement our policy, and if we're going to go against our policy, we need that direction.
well, I think I've been clear myself that I'm open to having those conversations, see what that looks like. I don't know if the rest of the council really weighed in on that piece of it, if that's what we're needing to, but ideally we have tonight.
I guess I'm torn from the standpoint that, well, what I'm hearing is there's a desire to have a parkway like experience in this part of the city, this development. And to Sabrina's point, you know, that was known by the developer when he bought it. But at the same time, there's been a lot of changes. That's where just, it gets tough. Is that, you know, it comes down to economics, not only for the developer, but also for future city budget as we go forward. You know, I don't think we've talked much about, settled on, you know, are we gonna put the bill for a parkway along our JD4, you know, should that come to fruition where we have that land? That could be a significant expense for this city. You know, so it's not just the developer that's asking tonight, but it's the future developer as well. And what I'm hearing is that this parkway, what I feel like I've heard is that this parkway and the footprint that comes with that phrase is significant, even though the drive lanes aren't any more than what the current developers are asking for. It just gets to be more expensive when you have this parkway designation due to the nature of it. So when it was originally platted, I think there was several hundred more homes intended to be a part of it. Knowing that it's never, I mean, it's changed in just the 4 years I've been here, it's 3.5 years, it's changed a lot. So I guess I'm torn as far as how important that parkway section is to have that that green space between the drive lanes, you know. We get a lot of pressure as a council to keep our levy in check. You know, I don't know if there's been some modeling done from Dave's team as far as what, you know, the difference is maintaining several more miles of trail and, you know, additional road that this thing is designed to do. So I guess I wish I had a definitive answer, but I mean, it's a tough one. I'd be curious what other people's opinions are.
I think you're headed on the head pretty much in your explanation. As far as the parkway thing goes, the widths of the roads, the trails and things like that, I think are cumbersome. Hard to flex that for spending, stuff like that. It's something it sounds like it's been on the books and for quite some time, and there's been some changes and nothing's really been landed on it, so it's kind of hard to move with that without additional change.
I think this, for me, to your point, 3.5 years for me or whatever, this just seems like this was a plan from a council 20-25 years ago, probably, that this is what we're gonna do. And there hasn't been the ability for more current councils to really, can we afford this now? Back then, when they did this major parkway, there was actually grant money. That's what you did. You did these big grandiose things because development wasn't so expensive. That's clearly changed. Talk about $1 million a mile of road. That probably was 200,000 back when they were contemplating this. So the ability to have just a check-in, whether it's with the public, the city, and I don't know what that looks like as an engagement. This is a huge decision here. And other than, hey, we think we need to change the direction of it, this council and the previous council really hasn't had much opportunity to weigh in on it. It's just been, we think we should change the direction, but not what the look is and the feel and what we want to do. And so, you know, but yet not wanting to hold up what, you know, the current developer has a plat being enforced. How do you do that? But this doesn't stop this, but we really make sure this is what we want. We listen more, you know, more feedback from properties that are majorly affected, and be nice to have that pause if possible. Still have some development going.
We do.
Go ahead. Yeah.
I just will say, we do contemplate it in the code that if the infrastructure isn't available and ready, then the development's premature. And it is grounds for denial of a preliminary plat. So, you know, the code, the plans that are in place right now do show that as a parkway, whether or not we still support the PUD plan. regardless of the PUD plan being there or not, it's still being part of the road, we do have standards in our engineering. standards. So I think the council, it's, you know, I think this question really does come up, are we just not there right now for development to keep extending to the south and the west?
That's what I'm trying to avoid is stop, I don't wanna stop development, but yet, you know, you have some.
But Abby, we have other plats coming, we know that in this area.
We have other plats, they're predominantly east of Highway 61.
Okay.
At this time, there are no other active plats or concept
Correct.
plans west of,
And we don't know what other land might be under contract right now.
I don't believe there's any other land under contract right now, but that could potentially be on those south corners.
And the parkway that would come along our JD4 project, would any of that parkway be funded by the grant?
This grant currently is just for design and acquisition. So first off, we need to be able to see if we can actually afford land, if we have willing landowners. Because of the nature of the project and it being for flood control, stormwater, capture and volume control, overall community resiliency, we do believe that there is the possibility for additional grant funding in the future. And it would be our hope that we could combine in some of those other infrastructure costs that help support that future or preserved area. But we have no guarantee.
And would not the JD4 project potentially give developers a financial advantage? Because they wouldn't have to burden a bunch of their land for ponds. They could drain drainage into our JD4 ponds versus having to build their own ponds.
That is,
And give up valuable buildable land.
that is correct. The property that's owned by the Cerdys and each on the east and the west would be able to drain into that system. At this time, we've never contemplated whether or not we oversize that system and charge that back. That is an opportunity. I will say we haven't had the best history with projects like that. And from an economic development perspective, I would say if we want to design this system, and this would come later, if we were able to acquire the property, that we would try to oversize the stormwater to the greatest extent possible for the future benefit of those property owners.
Which for the Cerdys in particular, that could be a real advantage. Because they'd have a lot more buildable land that would give you a lot more units, which for a developer, they could sell them. Versus giving up your land for ponds that you'd have to put in if you didn't have that option.
Okay, I don't think that's true, what you just said about ponds, because you're still gonna have to have ponds. You're not gonna let stormwater run directly into this wetland area without
So I
having
wanna-
it. You're gonna have to.
I want to just clarify, we are not building a wetland bank.
It's
Yeah.
not,
If
Oh, I
we
understand,
acquired
but
the
whatever you're building, I'm saying, you're not gonna let builders just have storm pipes that go directly into that. Whatever you wanna call it, oasis, without them having ponds to pre-treat the water before it leaves their site, are you?
We have not contemplated the design at this point, but the intent of it is to allow for the water to go into this area of the adjacent lands.
Right. But Brian, you know what I'm saying, you're gonna have to have treatment on your own land before the water can be discharged off the
Future
site.
development would have to be watershed requirements.
Right, which you're gonna have to still have ponds that treat the water. The other thing, you're dealing with a secondary line on JD4. We dealt with the primary line and paid for it all without a grant on our site.
So I think good point. I mean, it's debatable whether, how much would be able to treat, but we feel it is a positive. This project is a positive for development. However, what we're talking about tonight is the side of the parkway and where it's going has no effect on this project other than maybe it leans itself, so it's right next to it. So, so yes, they are probably gonna benefit for that, but it doesn't mean that it's the right thing to take all that land and put this parkway on one property owner to bear that, I guess, so. I think, Councilmember Valento, you were strongly, wanting to see that vision that was 20 years ago with the parkway and the trails, right? So that's kind of your thoughts on it. I'm just trying to get where we're at here. So we get at least some direction.
Yeah, I'm torn, I'm more inclined to follow the vision, because I think that's just what it is, it's a vision, and I think a lot of people would be drawn to that, to live there. Things that I wouldn't wanna compromise on are the turn lanes for the road and the trails on both sides. When it comes to the median, that is what I'm more torn on. But I like the idea of the parkway. I like the idea of that being in our community, and what I'm kind of like aligning it to is the same thing of how we like to put the blue light posts on certain roads. You know, we're not gonna put that on every road, but is it a nice aesthetic? It is. And I feel like it's almost similar to the same thing of us changing our street signs, of putting, you know, like our logo on there. Like, it's one area within our town that would just have this super nice aesthetic with it, that it would tie into the J4. I don't know.
Yeah, and those are all, I mean, aesthetics, some about that, but all those things are things that the city pays, we pay extra. We're gonna enhance this, typically pay for that enhancement. Yes, so that's why. What is the time frame here from, you just submitted something, and when do you guys, like, we have some runway here just to have some more conversation with staff and to try to wrap things up here tonight with some kind of.
Or we could have another work session, but to your point, all that stuff comes with the cost that you're just added. And if that was one of our options, if the city wants to keep this parkway that isn't serving our block, pay for a third of it.
So if I could help maybe get the council to
Please.
questions.
Please.
So I think what I hear is, so just to orient us back to the beginning, the developer asked for this work session, right? Because they wanted to come in and they wanted to ask for essentially variances from the current PUD requirements, specifically in this case, the road size. And what I heard tonight from the developer was that either they're asking for a variance from the road size, or they're asking for the city to pay for a third of the road. And so from a next step perspective, the next step would be for the council potentially to give the developer some feedback on your interest in considering a PUD amendment. Because if the road scope is going to change, right? If we're going to say no median, or one side, a sidewalk on, or trail on only one side, or whatever the thing is that we're changing about the road, that would require the PUD amendment. And so that would be something ultimately that the developer would be bringing to the city to ask for that amendment. And the alternative, it would be for the city to make essentially an amendment to our policy, the policy being that the city, that developers pay their own way, where we would view roads like we do pipes, right? Like water main pipes or whatever. And if we feel like this is an oversized road, then we would be essentially paying the difference of that oversizing of the road. The problem with roads versus pipes is it's a much more difficult number to quantify. How much is the road being overbuilt? A pipe is very easy. You can do the number on how much water you need. And if there's more water capacity in the pipe, that's the difference, right? This is a little more complicated, but an analysis could still be done and something could be determined. They're proposing 1/3 as the sizing of the road. So those are the two asks from the developer. So I think really at this point, it's maybe direction back to the developer about what you would like them to see. Bring forth a PUD amendment, bring forth a, potentially a policy change, or we're not interested in either of those at this time. And then if you're not interested in either of those at this time, potentially then there's a direction to staff, but we want to have a conversation about longer term planning for fancy roads versus not fancy roads, collector roads versus non-collector roads, whatever that. That's totally outside my bailiwick in terms of that would be a Ryan conversation, but that would be the third sort of determination. Is that helpful?
Mr. Mayor, can I ask a question? Ryan, if we are looking at this road size that we've got in our plan versus what the developer is proposing. Is it a third bigger than what they normally would be putting in?
My quick gut tells me no, because of the number that I told you guys on the pavement was.
Yeah, that was, right, exactly, that's what I was, in my head, I was calculating, it doesn't seem like.
There's two
payment.
more, there's two
No,
more
they have.
curb lines, right?
Yep.
There's a loss to the right of way. Collector Road on 190, how wide would that be? This one. Not being a parkway.
At least 90 feet, I think is what, I think we have that identified in the compound.
Right, have you done an analysis to determine what the cost difference is for the median without median?
Yeah, so.
We did talk about that.
Well, he's looking that up where we got the 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, or each side of the, let's say you went down the center property line. One landowner pays a third, one landowner in the city pays a third. That is what's happened in other cities.
Sure, no, I
So that's
appreciate
where we
that.
came up with that. is
I
that-
appreciate that, but I,
Mr. Brueggemann asked, well, what if we just take out the median, just put pavement there, right? So you would still have curb line on the outside stays where it is as proposed in their plat they submitted. So then we took out the concrete median and the signage that would be in there, the grass boulevard. And just put blacktop in there, and actually that estimate that Jeremy, one of my coworkers prepared, showed that that would be. A striped median. Would be $12,648 cheaper than that South Hidden Creek South development as proposed based on numbers from our contractor.
so the cost to the developer is $12,640 more. If we have the median in versus no median.
If you just took out the median entirely, replaced it with blacktop.
That doesn't seem like a third. In terms of the cost of that section of road. Oh, yes, maybe.
Well, it's also the cost of the oversized road right of way that is being taken as well. From a.
But you said you were, well, you said you were okay with the road the way it was if we just took out that center median.
No, I never said that. I never said that. That was okay. Did I say that tonight?
No,
Not tonight, but
at a workshop.
you did
No,
say
I
that.
don't,
I think that was asked of staff.
I don't know that I've just taken out the median, because you still have the 90-foot or now 100-foot road right away.
It'd
So
be a little narrower.
if I said that, and I'm sorry, that's not my feelings.
It's still, you know, to Hannah's point here, just the aesthetics of it, it seems like some people are questioning that, just that size of the road and what's gonna drive it. Shrinking up that road, it's still having the nice aesthetics on one side. If it's two trails, trees, I think you're still there. You just don't have this, a lot of space you're taking up, whether it's a median or a grass median or concrete. I think you can still achieve those aesthetics, and that's where, again, this seems like a 20-some year plan that we just have not had a chance to really be comfortable with. And that's what I'm trying to get us to. So there might not be a lot of direction, unfortunately. I don't know how that affects what this, you know, this application, the current application is, and how that holds it up or not. But I don't feel comfortable making any decision, because we've just not, again, other than just the direction, we're gonna change the direction. Okay, well, that sounds good. That's really that all this council's been asked, and the previous council.
So could we have a meeting with staff and then have another work session?
Mayor Roberts will say it there. With regard to the current plan conforms to the standards that have been presented. So that plan could move forward if the developer wanted it to.
I didn't hear what I'm not hearing you.
Oh, the current plat submitted conforms to the city's standards and plans. So that could move forward if it wanted to. Staff is more than willing to sit down and talk with the developer at any point. I think it's whether or not, you know, we need to come back in a work session. I heard earlier you may be favorable to that infrastructure phasing policy that we talked about. It may be possible we can come to some sort of agreement. with a PUD amendment, but I think, yes, we need to sit back down. We frankly haven't been given that opportunity for a while.
So if no changes were made, do you want that to move forward or would you want to hold?
It's currently tabled until the 29th of June, the 23rd.
20th of June is your extended 60 days.
Yeah, so we asked for an extension, so it's just been hovering while this dialogue has gone on. So, yeah.
The only reason that plan is drawn is staff would not accept it if we didn't draw it that way. That's not our desire. The only reason we drew it is the staff told us they wouldn't accept it, but we couldn't get to here without going there. Okay, so just because it's drawn on paper, that doesn't mean that's what we want. That's what we were directed. If we want the city to accept it, that we could even move forward with it. That's why we're here.
But you say you prefer to pull that in?
I'm not saying that. I'm just saying the only reason it's drawn with this big row is because we were told they wouldn't accept it, period, without that design.
We were just, as a reminder, we're just trying to avoid.
Yeah.
The agreement to disagree, which has been systemic, and regardless for my part or their part, doesn't really matter how we got there. So we just tried to roll with it and ask financially, if you're upset, but I thought it was a great job, kind of some choices. We're just looking for direction, and so it's been tabled all the way.
Yep, so Paul and Ryan, I guess what I'm asking is if we don't have the median in and it's just straight and we still put the 2 lanes in, which they have to put in, and we still put the curbs on and we still put the sidewalks on, how much narrower is that road gonna be? You know, Paul likes to say this huge road, so forgive me, this huge road, I mean, how much difference is the road gonna be in terms of width if we do it that way versus the 2 lanes and the turn lanes?
It's a complicated response.
Well, right.
Because
I can tell you,
right at the intersection where there's turn lanes right now.
Which has to be at that width because of the turn lanes.
So one lane, on one side is 16 feet, the other side is 28, right? So you could have some reduction at the intersections without that kind of median in there, that at least 4 feet is removed out of that median in there. Now, you want to put the road on a road diet between intersections and have tapers. So once you get to the areas that are in the middle of intersections, which you know, not filled what the width of the turn lane would be. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So when you get closer to the intersection, then it starts tapering out to account for that. I mean, you can go all the board to try to save square foot of traffic. So that's why I just can't give you a number.
No easy answer.
I mean, we could take their plats.
But the turn lane on the outside, those with the inside, right? So as we come up to the intersection, if we turn right, the turn lane could go on the right. Okay.
So you're looking to have a right turn lane and as proposed, it's a left turn. Right into intersection.
Traffic flows coming from south. Going north, right? Would be pretty good.
can I ask both Abby and Ryan, based on what we demonstrated tonight on the TAS area, the volume, what we demonstrated, does any of that have you guys take a pause to think about that we're not out lunch with our idea on the size of the street?
I think you're truly underestimating what's identified in the long-term plan.
Okay, so how about if we do this, Ryan? Or council? I'll pay for a traffic study. If we identify that road doesn't need to be as big as it is with the turn lanes, you pay for it. If it does, I'll pay for it.
Well, again,
And it can't be Ryan's firm that does the traffic study. We gotta find somebody else that, I don't know anybody that does that right now, but all my guys are retired.
Here's.
we're really, not focused on today.
Yeah.
We're focused on the future. I mean, and that's the hard part about traffic studies. How do you go out and do a traffic study for 10 years or 15 years down the road, Paul?
Well, you're holding us to a study that was done 20 some years ago. The PUD and the AUAR.
I'm not, to answer your question, I'm not a traffic engineer, but I believe that you have certification, you have to follow a set of rules. based on densities and other things and run them out in the future, depending on what the criteria is, right. And come up with traffic counts where they are. Our general argument is that the rooftops south of where headwaters currently terminates, no matter where it turns into Elm Crest or another 98 will never generate the traffic flow that remotely requires turn lanes. The AUVR, I showed you, their graphic already said that. That was 20 years in the past. Their graphic clearly says no turn lanes, but there is on Fenway. I'm not wrong about that, right, Ryan? The way that they describe that in the graphics on the back of the issue, that actually is correct, right?
I do think you misquoted it, because they're on the front page of the middle.
I'm sorry, where I'm going with that is that
Exclusive
the traffic
lanes are necessary at intersection locations, and as I, the
Ryan, can you go back and just restart what you were saying? 'Cause I think it's important.
I think the thing you clicked on the AER specifically tells you turn lanes would be required at intersections. The figure that was clipped out showing why it just has two arrows is because deeper into the AUR, if you read through it, it states that this hasn't been built yet. So it's obviously indicating the 2-lane road east of Fenway that was built, and that's where they specifically have the additional arrows that show. So
west of Fenway.
west of Fenway, at this clip you pulled out of the AUR, nothing was constructed yet, so they didn't have an exact location of where the intersections would be. That's why they just show the two arrows. Also in that AUR, it specifically says at intersections, turn lanes are necessary at intersection locations.
Yeah, and I think that's awesome because I've read that whole paragraph in the executive summary, not actually in the traffic, like 10 times. And if you read it from the top where it starts on traffic on page 7, Roman numeral 7, and read it down, the way I read that page, and I've read it multiple times and I'm not a dog in this fight, but nonetheless, it is talking about general intersections, big intersections inside the ADVR. The final paragraph says, and turning lanes are in all. It is not saying every road in this ADVR or in our graphics has to have turning lanes. That is not how I read it. And I've encouraged the council to read that section in the ADVR from the executive summary, Roman numeral 7, traffic down. I've read it, I've read it, I've read it. That paragraph is taken out of context, in my opinion.
So
I'm not talking about that.
If I went to that, I'd be happy with sending the AUAR. I think this has been a lot of the dialogue that we've had with developers over the years. We're trying to work through it. I think that's why we're here tonight. But this is the dialogue that we get, no matter what staff says. It is contradicted. And so I would really hope that at least tonight we can walk away and agree to sit down and meet and see if we might be able to come back with a solution as a proposal for an amended PUD. If that's what the council would like to see us do.
I think, you know, if 3 of us or however we were saying, no, it's a hard no, you know what, you guys, this is where it's gonna go, we have to do it. Then that's, I think, the direction you get, but you're not getting that direction, right? There's a little bit of just uncertainty on how this should go. And quite honestly, since from beginning, the new direction of the Parkway, I'm still challenged with. So I think that would be great if we could just start that. We got an important item coming up here that we need to spend some time on this evening yet. And so with that, I think just need to end. And if you guys can set a meeting and figure out maybe how we go forward.
I just want to verify the start that is to sit down and staff meet with the developer. Was there any direction to bring back to the council, any additional conversations about infrastructure design as a whole or long range transportation planning? Because I think that is part of the challenge, and we're not going to just see that here. We're going to see that as we continue to excel.
I'd like to see the full AUR report, especially. And I would love for this topic about the design of this road to maybe come back for all conversation, because we need to decide if we want this thing to be a median 100-foot wide road for the rest of the way, or so we can settle this, whether it's these developers or others. I think we need to have that conversation. Perhaps even thanks to council, quite frankly, to really just all be on the same page of what is our expectation, because this is a unique road, being a parkway. It's not just a collector road, it's a parkway collector road, which has its own costs associated with it. not only for the developer, but also for the city long term. And, they just made a great point. It was just a 25-year-old plan. Lots of that plan are no longer existent. In terms of hundreds of households in Headwaters 123, so forth. So I think I would benefit from having a deeper conversation just to make sure that we're all on the same page.
We can certainly prepare that for you. I don't know that we can have that in Monday's meeting. It just sounds like you're looking for a lot of detail.
No, not really. I don't know. Let's have that Monday night.
You just said the next meeting, so I wanted to.
Oh, no. Yeah. So I don't have to read it by then.
Monday to Monday, Monday meeting, right?
Yeah, I wouldn't have it by Monday.
Okay, and then, we can get that AR sent out to you. I think what I'll do is I'll put together a packet that includes kind of all those studies that we've been referencing, so you can take a look for your reading pleasure. And then I would say, once we're ready to kind of get that next step set up, that we do that in a maybe more even presentation style in the council forum, where staff has this opportunity then to view. It's good, I think, to present it out to the public as well. Not to say that this doesn't work, no, I agree, but I think that we've had some challenges with audio visual, and it's been kind of help keep everyone informed.
And then you brought up a couple of times, conversations we've been having at the EDA about, more affordable options, the interim versus long-term. Maybe that could be part of the conversation with development.
And Paul, if you're okay with that, I'm okay with that, because I think it's only fair to do our due diligence the best we can before we make a final decision.
Absolutely. All right, thank you. Anything else from your side of things or perspective?
The only other point that I don't think I brought up here, I brought up in the planning commission meeting is, again, we're talking about the alignment of the parkway and the way that option one aligned, connected in with what is currently known as 195th Street. Just a reminder, whether it's the parkway or other roads where they stub off, is only about 300 feet or so from that stub to this privately maintained road. People are gonna use, they already are, people are gonna use the shortest path. You've seen it a million times with construction around the city and what's happening even now on Fenway and stuff with 97 being closed. Less than 500 feet to a dirt road for a quarter mile that will get them to the freeway faster. Just keep that in mind as you're thinking about planning and where a normal person would probably go. Like I said, right now, it's 20-acre parcel away, stuffed off, and there's tracks. If you go right out there and take a look, there are tire tracks going back and forth through there. People are using it. Not as much as last summer, but it still happens.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate your
Thank you.
time, all of you. So this is probably the longest discussion I've ever been involved with, over 2 hours, which is great. So we're gonna take like a 5-minute break here, if that's okay. Thank you. We got a big issue coming up.
Yeah.
Thank you. My wife, I think I got tomorrow.
Well, no, good.
Yeah, wow.
No objection.
She brought snacks. Poor Ellie, pregnant mama. Ellie, like, definitely she brought snacks.
I literally was just like, if I come out of my office, I got these.
Oh my gosh, I would be dying.
I have some bad news. I think this next item should take the case for one. We were just talking as well. I don't know if you guys are gonna be able to get through it all. It's so much.
Yeah, this one.
Yeah. And respectful.
I know. I was thinking.
But yeah.
We texted, yeah, like 7.
Or yeah, so.
There you go.
Yeah, like, it's not like, oh. Getting in bed, yeah, getting up in the morning. Yeah. Good, yeah. He is. So crazy. We're done, yeah. Yeah, so how he's like, just today, it's like, you know, I'll pull himself up. And then his secretary was and then I also asked him to chin. And tomorrow I didn't hear back. Oh, where's, you know, yeah, and then he was like, stood, but I was quality for like, I turned and just stops the first. And then 3 times today, which I'm like, this was a coincidence, but he kept saying. It before, he kept saying like the word go. You know, I was like, thank you so much. I appreciate it. You might be watching our third interview. But so I was here before he was saying, and then. Like that, yeah, 3 times. So he said, like, yes, of course. I thought I might be around. I didn't under. Now I'm like starting to see it because then I was like, then I was excited again, and then I say yes, next to together. Again, I don't letter, but and then I got some stuff. I just telling her that they're all very hard. So it's funny, I expected you to live in here and that's fine. Not like, but it's for the free Sunday and then already planning his birthday party. I'm super excited for it. I'm about to be super sad about, you know, and then I'll probably what's the thing, and there are, yeah, so. I had one, and then both, and so. And for the inside. And then this one came out for, and I was like, this is obviously, and it is. But I'm like, this is perfect. So it's like an open book, opening up the chapter 1. Oh, and at least so, and then I'm like, there like, so it's in fancy. So, like a fashion or ground. I'm really making this, but I was thinking, talking about.
If I just get done with my money, or you can go down to the next.
And so I have to really down for it.
Exactly.
I don't know.
You know, it's crazy. So look, it's got. I mean, if there's something, you say they have one.
Excuse me, I think building wellness together, I know, so.
West Breeze. That's what I was.
I know.
Yeah.
All right. So we're gonna like, so.
It works just. Sorry to put you on the spot like that, wild thing started, but I figured you know better than me.
No, but they can leave as early as the week.
What's your other? Doing out baby and grace. Yeah, I know, I'm like, you're just my baby until you're ready.
Great, so I guess we could.
Do we want that? Or you just do it?
Yeah, so that is. So it's gonna go on. I think I could have written anything like that, yeah. Wait, great, yeah. It's not even going to. Well, I don't know.
All right, is everyone's got everyone back, don't we? So next item is Public Works Facility Project Considerations, and it's like Jolene might be starting it.
Yeah, I'm gonna kick it off, Mayor, just, we've got this back on the agenda tonight just to kind of get refocused on the project and to establish some clear direction on the project. And that's particularly around the funding, because that's the key to all of this. How that funding is gonna drive the scope and how we wanna manage this project as we move forward. So, Ellie's gonna walk through some discussion about funding options. I know for the last 6 or so, 7 months, the focus has really been on the local sales tax aspect of financing this project. Full disclosure, that is not a given. We cannot count on that. And if we're gonna continue to move this project forward, we need to have a really robust discussion with council and have really solid discussion about what the financing really looks like. And I don't think that we've had that since we've had these new processes. So just trying to get us recentered here so that we can really look at what the totality of this project is gonna cost taxpayers. And how those costs or those projected costs are gonna impact the scope and the timeline of this project. So I'm gonna turn it over to Ellie. And then once she walks through this, we'll have some discussion, then we'll move on to a couple of different items related to this project.
Thank you.
So I'm gonna walk through PowerPoint like Julian said. I'm gonna stop after each slide, ask if there's questions. I would like it to be much more of a discussion than me sitting here talking at you. As when I go through this PowerPoint and I just practice it in my head, I get a little bored. So I would like it to be more of a conversation, what makes sense and how the different impacts, because we're gonna walk through the agenda. We're gonna talk about the assumptions that went into this PowerPoint, local option sales tax, shake debt, level debt, and then the funding structure, and if it's something we would like to reconsider. So as we go through this PowerPoint, we're gonna have a lot of assumptions that are based off of the numbers that we're providing. We needed a baseline so that we could draw from there. These numbers, obviously, if the cost goes down, the levy impact and all of that will go down. The cost goes up, the levy impact will go up. So with that, the current breakdown of funding is supported 50% through the general fund. And so that would mean we would be levying 50% of the project cost to 50% of 40 million is 20 million. And then we have 12.5 going to the water fund and then 37.5 going to the sewer fund. This was the funding layout when the project was sitting at roughly 20 to 25 million. The thought process was the sewer fund is more liquid and there's a lot more funding in that versus the water fund. And we wanted to keep those water rates fairly consistent with what we're seeing with our comparable cities. And so this allowed us to do that when the project was sitting at that 20 million. This is something the council can come back and say, you wanna know what, if we get this funding mechanism, let's adjust these rates. If we get this one, let's go here and here. And as soon as we start to play it out and we get things a little bit more firm, we can walk through different scenarios, what that could look like. But these can all be changed. Any questions on breakdown?
Yeah, so, other than the fund, that sewer fund being or healthy, is it also a good way to put it is that more people are on city sewer than on city water? Because you're having more people pay the sewer fee, are you not?
Yeah, there's definitely more connections of a sewer than the water fund. I think probably both are true. I know that the sewer fund is a lot more healthier than the water fund. If you can remember, there's been some substantial water rate decreases up to upwards of 10% last couple of years that are just keeping up with operations, whereas the sewer has been pretty flat, 3%, 4% for that year. So it's just a healthier account, but you are correct as well that there is more connections citywide to sewer than one.
Just because, more of the residents are gonna be paying for that, so I think that's good, we're gonna have a higher percentage on the sewer than.
So
So the first funding option, like Jolie talked about, is that local sales tax. So with that local sales tax, it is something that we have to get approval through legislation, and then we have to come back through a referendum. If this were to be the scenario we play out, the levy impact would be in neutral. So you can see that right here, the new debt we would take on would be $0. And this would be because all of that funding that the sales tax would be coming in for would support the new project cost. you can also see that we still are showing a standard 5% levy increase. This is based off of the 10-year plan. So if we move forward, we completely remove the public works facility based off of that 10-year plan created by Ellers in 2028, because that's when the funding would hit, we would be looking at just a 5% levy increase based off of inflation, staff costs, and other factors. So the baseline of that levy is 5% as we're walking through this presentation. Questions?
I might have missed something. Are you saying it's a 5% increase if we get the local state?
Yes.
Or the sales tax?
So this 5% just assumes like that would be what our starting point would be for the levy. This would factor in additional staff, this would factor in inflation. So this would be, even without the facility, we bring that to you with that 5%.
So that's our budget projections.
Yep.
For 2028. 5.1%,
Yep.
which is good.
And so then how about the sewer and water funds? Are we still using those then, or?
So within local option sales tax, if we were to look at that, I would recommend, based off my financial analysis and my financial expertise, I would say we would look to remove all funding from the water and sewer fund and just fund it all out of this local sales tax, as we did right up to $50 million for a request. So it would be able to cover all of those expenditures. And then as we walk through this presentation, you're gonna see rates are gonna have to start to increase with the size of this bond. So that would be a recommendation. We'd come back to the council and say, hey, sales tax got approved. The voters approved it in our referendum. Finance is recommending that we would then switch and have all of the funding come from the general levy, as it would be, I hate the term net zero, but it would be a net zero impact.
Good budget.
Can I ask a question? How can it be a net zero impact if presumably the entirety of the project is due in 2027, 2028, but the sales tax is not, I mean, it runs for how many years does the sales tax have for?
It runs for 22 until we complete the project.
So
we would,
Well, we've completed we have to pay the contractors like, now.
Yep.
So are we temporarily loaned, are we using our temporary loan for ourselves?
so with the way the revenue is collected, we would still go for bonding, but instead of paying for that bonding through property tax, we would have a separate line item. We would introduce a new line item to the budget, and it would just be sales tax revenue.
Got it.
And that revenue line would go to then offset the property tax. So your expenditures would still increase, but your revenues would be increasing associated with it.
So then you're structuring your bond to match whatever your
Yep.
sales tax. Thank you for that clarifying.
Well,
Maybe everybody else already knew that and I was the only one who didn't understand that.
So
Sorry.
if the local sales tax is approved, and there's nothing in the levy, we're not gonna use sewer or water funds. Is there a path where we can lessen the increase of the increase each year for our sewer, those two funds?
So without
Potentially,
too much analysis, I would say that right now, those 10-year projections that we did show you, I think back in, it was my second month here, so back in October, it did factor in these bonds, and that did include those standard rate increases. So we would look with off of what Dave's public works people need and what we are seeing in the economic climate, but there is a possibility we could even hold rates, yes.
I think that would be a good point to the public, that not only would it not affect their property taxes, it's not also gonna affect these, their fees are gonna stay maybe not level, but not increase as much.
Any other questions on the local sales tax portion of it? Perfect. So then we are on to shape debt. And so we're gonna talk about the difference between shape debt and level debt. Shape debt is structured debt that changes over time, so it is not level. There are different types of ways you can shape your debt. So you can have lower now and higher on the back end. You can front load your debt, so it's higher on the front end and lower on the back end, or you can customize it. So you can choose, okay, for these 5 years, it's gonna be low, the next 5 years, it's gonna be high, and so on and up and down. The levy impact, so if you do have that that is shaped and it's lower on the front end, your levy will be lower. But then if you do it in the back end, then it'll be higher. So it'll just flow with what you're paying. And the way you can do that is
basically you're either paying just principal or principal and interest. So those first couple months with our shape debt, we would look to shape it around our two existing bonds that expire in 2034. So this would allow us to then only pay interest on the public works debt when we are paying still interest and principal on our GO bonds and our Series 2019 bonds. However, with delaying this, we do see an increase of total bond costs by roughly $4 million. 2 million of it go to the levy, 2 million of it go to utilities. But you do have, just in 2028 alone, you can see it, as we work through these, I keep all of the options right next to each other so that you can see them building. And so in 2028, if we went out through what is called that shape debt and we only pay our interest right off the bat, then we would propose that 9.9% levy when we go through these. And so that is building off of your base is that 5%, and then taking on this additional debt, but only paying the interest, then we're sitting at that 9.9. Questions?
840,000 is a 4 point something, almost 5 point difference.
Yep.
Could we use water and sewer costs towards that?
So on the next slide, we'll talk about the impacts of the rates. And so this is just the levy funded portion. So this is just that $20 million portion of it.
Not state tax, or not a city tax.
Correct. So this is just if we went out for shape debt and we went out for that 40 million total, this is what the $20 million impact would look like. And then with that, when we start to factor in how does this affect our utility rates? This is where you start to see the impact. So these are the quarterly rate increases to just keep these funds not at a negative balance. And so that would mean quarterly for our water bill, we would look for an increase, and this is what we're seeing for average water use. We told what our average water use was, and then we did some math of $5.56. And this is also too important to note that this does not include our standard rate increases that we would look to have each year. This is solely just to include into the new debt options. And then when it comes to 2034, because with that shaping of the debt, we are taking more payments on in the future, then the average utility bill for water would increase to $7.60. Questions?
Again, that doesn't take into account other rate increases that would be required. This is specific just to covering the bond impact.
And then also just something of interest, so the percentage of revenue that would go to support these bonds, I just thought it was interesting to see that, of all of the revenue generated for water, 6% of it would go to support it in 2028, and then we would need 8.2% of it to support it in 2034. And then when we start to look at our sewer, these are where we will see a little bit of a higher increase. So our quarterly sewer rate increase for 2028 would be at $19.16. And then the sewer rate increase for 2034 would be $26.19. And these would be quarterly rate increases that people would see with that shape debt model, because we are taking those lower payments on the front and the higher payments on the back. Questions?
What money?
And I just want council to be cognizant of the fact that while there are more users connected to sewer than there are water, there's still a lot of residents within the city who aren't connected to either. So I just think that that's an important factor to consider when we're discussing all of this.
Right, it's $90 change for sewer, well, $5, almost $6 for water, so you're talking. Right out of the gate, it's $100 a year. For water,
For water and sewer.
Water and sewer.
Without the.
Plus your property taxes.
Plus property. Well, does that take into account, yeah, again, I'm sorry, now I've lost my train of thought, because Leaf made me laugh here. I'll come back.
Perfect, stop me.
Yeah.
Mid-sentence if it does. So then, the third option would be a level debt, and so this is exactly what it says. This is, we take our bond and we structure it over the course of the payment. You're gonna pay interest and principal right off the bat. Pros of this one is it's easy to understand, it makes sense. We can do consistent budgeting. We're not gonna, as we walk through these scenarios, you won't see those spikes on the back end, because what you get right off the bat is what you're gonna see. However, there is less flexibility to see that short-term relief of the levy. And so when we're looking at it in comparison to our, 2028 sales tax option with that base of that 5%, and then we're at that 9.9. With the projection for the level debt, we would see it at 13.9. This is a higher increase between the two because it is taking those payments on up front. However, we will see that it's $4 million cheaper to go with level debt because we are paying principal and interest right away. Questions on the three models?
Your previous one, my question was gonna be, was that taking into account future rooftops?
So this is based off of what was built in the 10-year plan. So they assumed roughly, I think it was between, Abby, I want to say 100 houses a year when they did the original 10-year plan.
That was the intention.
Perfect.
Yeah, there was some rooftops built in, but no multi-family.
Okay, that's what I thought.
No commercial.
Sure.
So then looking at the utility rates, if we do take on level debt, so then we would see a water bill increase. Once again, these are quarterly increases of $10.21. And that water, the cost to pay for that levy, the cost to pay for that debt would make up 26% of all water revenue that is generated. And then when we look at sewer, the rate increase would be $35.24, and we're at closer to just 11.8%. These numbers I felt were very important to share, just because when we do start to talk about options and we start to talk about costs, it's really important to just be transparent, and it does tell the story for the need, if that sales tax does get approved, what the financial impact it could have. So then, those are the three standard financing options. We can choose between shape debt, level debt, or if the sales tax does get approved, we could go down that route. I'm gonna walk through just a funding structure update so you guys can see, like, what does it look like if we can play around with these numbers. We are going from one extreme to the other here, so we are completely removing the water fund and the sewer fund from the equation. So now we're gonna look at what does it look like if we put all of this to the general fund. So that means we are taking those rate users out in general, which would give us the opportunity to say, hey, we're not increasing rates. But the effect on the levy would be, we would look to have a 14% levy increase in 28, and then a 22.8% levy increase for level debt in 2020. The nice thing is, within the 10-year plan, I should have included a slide. Once we do take these levy leaps, it does start to phase out. So you already hit that one big jump, and then you look and see, and we see a lot of 2 to 3% increases. And then when that debt does start to fall off, you do start to see almost a negative levy. But there is that one-time hit of, we are recognizing these payments, we're gonna increase the levy, we're increasing the standard budget, but then from there, it does start to taper off. And then I also included just notes of the total cost and principal of the bonds. So with the shape debt, you're looking at that $25.7 million worth of additional interest. And then with the level debt, you're looking at $21.8 million. And so that's where that $4 million difference comes in between level and shape debt. Questions?
Does anyone need to take a break to go outside and cool off?
It's warm in here also.
This is why I needed to bring this back to this council, because these are discussions that should have been happening in detail before we got to this point that we're at right now. This is a lot of money. And we cannot assume that we are going to be successful with the local sales option. We're gonna cross our fingers, we're gonna hope for the best, but we can't count on it. And in order to keep this project moving forward, this council's gonna have to have some tough discussions about these numbers and about the project as a whole.
And the local sales tax option would still be up to the voters.
Correct, that is always gonna be up to the voters. So the first hurdle we need to get through is getting that legislative approval that we're hoping will happen in May.
Right.
There's been some talk that there's a higher chance of local sales tax approvals at that legislative level since HCMC discussions have come into play, because HCMC is now pushing for the same thing. So maybe we have a little bit more of a chance to get that through the legislative process. But then it needs to go to the voters on the ballot in November, and that's gonna be the biggest hurdle, right? We're very limited in how we can promote, for lack of a better term, a local sales tax. We can't use taxpayer dollars to promote and push the approval of a local sales tax. We can discuss it, we can put information out about the facts around a local sales tax, but we can't partner with Goff as we're going to start talking about the need for a public works facility. We can't use them to promote a local sales tax. So it's an uphill battle. And I think that this is gonna be a tough discussion, but we're really behind the ball with looking at the real financial impacts of this project. So these are some things we're really gonna have to put some work into here, and council's really gonna have to make some tough decisions.
Individual council members, with the mayor example, we could make videos individually that we could talk about that, and we could talk about the benefits, the pros and the cons, and share or not.
I believe so. We can't use taxpayer dollars.
Correct.
So, yeah.
We could, yeah, to that point, go talk to
Absolutely.
different service organizations and, just groups to try to get the story out there as to.
Yeah,
Gain
absolutely.
their support.
If you want a copy of this PowerPoint, I think it tells a pretty good. story.
Yeah. Yeah.
It does.
Yeah, and like putting this kind of information on the website doesn't obviously cost taxpayer dollars. So
Right.
part of it is education.
It is.
And making sure that everybody can do the simple math of what happens to all of my taxes and utility costs versus.
So if we were able to raise funds, let's say through donations from local businesses, things like that, that might be in support of that, and we could get some printed materials out, that's that doesn't cost the city any money, we could do that as well, right?
I'm gonna defer to legal on that.
Well, you can, but just no different than we were educating, people about the budget, different things, can we not, to your point, education, you can pay for printed material or stuff on websites or.
Just can't get persuasive, right? And just.
Correct.
It
It's
can't
gotta be factual,
Right,
educational.
So here's what you're using the property, or here's what you're using the sales tax for. This is what you're getting for it.
Yeah.
If the sales tax does not pass, here's what would, here's how the funding mechanisms would have to go.
Yeah.
That is persuasive, obviously, but it's persuasive because it's actually
True, it's true, yeah.
impactful.
When I'm seeing your option 3, it's nice to think that this could be a one-hit wonder as far as big tax levy increase, but what's our tax rate going to in that situation where we're 14% or 22%.
I don't have it in front of me, but I can shoot it to you via email. I have it in one of the spreadsheets that I have.
It's gotta be significant. Your predecessor, as I was having very detailed budget conversations with him. When I pointed out the fact that there's a point in time where that debt gets paid off, you say, well, we really don't want to get that money back. You know, we want to use it for other things. So, well, it's nice to think that there could be low single digits in the future. You know, that's about the time we decide we need to start giving a few more miles of road every year because we're locked on that. So there's always something that the taxpayers know it. So I feel the last one to say this is gonna be a one-wonder tax levy increase because it's what we did 4 years ago.
I think that's the other thing on this building is that as much as we need it, concern is it's not just the cost, but it's how we're gonna be handcuffed going forward to your point of not being able to do more parks or infrastructure and all that. That's almost as concerning to me as numbers here because just we are behind a lot of things.
One other thing is this assumes that we won't get a cap on our property taxes, correct? So we can't project out to 2034 to know what if any caps may be in place by then. So that could be a real problem if we're.
That's something that's being debated at the state right now. Yeah.
And I don't, from what we've heard so far, it doesn't sound like it's going to be passing this year, but most things don't pass on their first tour down at the Capitol. It's their second, third, fourth, or fifth that they get passed. So that, fortunately, we wouldn't know. I don't honestly know what that would do if we have, for example, the shape debt where the thought is that we would be having a pretty significant increase in 2034.
The other option with shape debt is, we can look to see, the biggest thing would be that difference between that time frame would add that $4 million. We can work with Ellers to see if either we can call either one of these bonds earlier. So that means during budget season, this time around, we could have conversations with the council saying, hey, do we want to either pay 2 payments on these bonds this year to try to then shorten that time frame prior to 2034. And so that $4 million could then become $2 million, so then $1 million out of sewer and water and $1 million out of the property levy if we do call down those bonds sooner. And so that is also an option with shape debt. Most of the bonding we do go out for has that ability to call it down quicker. And so we could look into that as well.
Sheet debt though. Or the super sheet debt.
Yeah. And so there's a lot of ways to skin the cat.
Yeah. Good conversation.
What's the good news now?
The good news is this information is now out. People can look at it and we can start having good conversations on where do we want to go from here?
Well, I think the next part of this is more kind of hard conversations about the facility itself. So curious, knowing that we won't know if option 1 is an option until early November, where does that leave us in our planning? Like, do we have to keep running down the road spending money until we get to November and be like, oh snap?
Well, that is a discussion item for this council. You know, aside from just the scope of the project, whether you want to continue to maybe discuss that a little bit, you guys notice that I have a handout for you here, on your chairs tonight. This is what Gould has come up with. These are just real simple design updates based on some of the feedback that they received at the last session when they were in front of council on the 30th. I did ask Gould what, I said, I'm assuming that these updates reflect a $35 to $40 million budget. They're slightly over that still.
How slight?
Let me see.
They even said kind of 42 is where they. And
You
the
got
majority of that was,
40,000,004,000,
Yeah,
what was it?
40,004,000.
That's Wolves estimate, right?
correct.
Or Kraus Anderson, that's what.
It's Woolsey.
And that's, and 4 million of that is cutting out the cold storage. Right?
Left cold storage and on.
This one, I believe.
It's in, yeah, it's
Yeah,
in.
it's in.
So they had another 40 million, including the
Just,
cold storage.
just about 40 million, yeah.
So that was not including discussion of moving that to an alternate, I mean, picking your option, I think it was 5B, the one that. They worked that down to 40,004,000.
The cold storage was like the $5 million bill.
That was a 10,000 square foot pre-engineered building, so I think it was 2.5 to 3 million or something like that, I believe.
That was better. But
I think, well, the 16,000 of a tip up, 16,000 square foot tip up was like 4 million, wasn't it?
oh,
It was that first number that was.
Yeah, that sounds correct.
and it was, yeah, it got a lot of bit.
So right now, we're still in schematic design. Wolf's gonna come back next next Monday at our council meeting, and they're gonna present to you updated schematic design, and then they're gonna wanna move into design development. Council's gonna need to decide if that is the right option at this time, given the uncertainties about the funding and the major decisions that are gonna need to be made. Assuming, I think the most responsible thing to do is to plan that we're not going to get the local sales tax and come up with a plan to either see this project to fruition without that. And then be pleasantly surprised if we get it. But given the fact that there's so many uncertainties, I just have some hesitation right now. Moving to that next step, which is gonna be another, it's gonna be another check the city's going to need to cut to move into that design development. So I'd like to council to discuss what their comfort level is with that. But in addition to that, we haven't really honed in on a project management option being, the design bid bill, which is a tongue twister, which we would, in the everyday world, we call it like a general contractor option. Or the construction manager advisor option or construction manager at risk option. I think it's gonna be important when we get into that design phase with Wolf that we have that honed in and a decision made and going forward with either CMA, CMAR, or I'm just gonna call it general contractor. So Amanda's done a lot of work on this and has put together information that was contained in your packet about these three options. I'm gonna let her talk you through some of those, and then we can kind of come back and have some discussion about all of them.
Well, okay, so maybe, as far as moving forward, I think. I really, maybe I'm being too optimistic about how we can, educate people on the benefit of this sales tax. I mean, Oakdale has been successful. I mean, there's been cities that have been successful to get this that are maybe this a little more conservative than most, but I think there's a chance there. My thought would be that you for sure would hold off until a month from now, potentially, or it's a special session. We'll have some direction, like if now you're at the 50-yard mark, right? Now you gotta if we're not at, we know that that's not an option, then I think we really need to have a gut check as to what the dollar amount is and what do we unfortunately build with for the current use, not, or maybe it's a 10-year expansion. Or maybe this, point out this building here started out at 76,000 square feet and 29 million. We end up 56,000 square feet and 18 million. We were able to push back on. And yes, you talk to some of the departments, they're like, yeah, we shouldn't have cut the fire, one of the bays there. The police garage is too small, but other than that, I think we're 12 years into this building. Are we? Is it 14 or when did this building open?
We're 11 years in now, so we're gonna be of 2015.
I mean, I think this, even though they told us we needed 76,000. We're halfway to that 20-year. And it's holding up well and the spaces are fine. You know, in an administration where they had that big planning area, I think the plan is still is if we need more staff, maybe the cubicles and that, so you can adjust the spaces to be used differently. So I don't know. I think if sales tax thing, and maybe even if is still an option, we might need to really look at these numbers. We're gonna have to look at the footprint and what that looks like we can't build a 20-year out. I don't know. So, I think for sure, in my opinion, we would wait till we get to the legislature and you have a special session, maybe it's June, but we should know in about a month. I would guess.
We all sure hope so. Yeah.
So anyway, just my thoughts.
And then Mayor Roberts, also with that sales tax, if we do get to a point in time where when November hits and it does get approved, we have 3 years to call on it, and we also have 3 years to put it on a ballot before we'd have to go back. And so if we don't put it on the ballot this year, we do have up until 3 years to then re-put it on a ballot. And then with that, once a project is started, we can go back. So if it doesn't, we decide we need this public works facility, it doesn't get approved this year, we can always go back to the legislation after those next 3 years, even though we started to pay for this project. As long as the bond is still active, we can seek sales tax to help pay down that bond.
So we can start it, we don't get it now, but we ask in a couple of years.
Yeah.
That would help.
At session, we saw some projects that were already halfway started that were saying, hey, we are now at a standstill, we need more funding. So that's always also an option.
Where in this process can actually get something like this out to different people to bid on? Just so we can get some numbers from other people other than Kraus Anderson
And we will queue Amanda.
Great question.
because that would help make our decision if we've got 10 or 15 bids out there and they range anywhere from 6 to 7.
Yeah, so that really drives, stems from how you want the project to be managed. So design, bid, build, that's the general contractor route, the GC route. And so what happens is you would have to engage with presumably Gold to complete a full design set of plans, right? And then that design set of plans would be put out there through public bidding to have any and all contractors who want to bid on building the project. And then hypothetically, at that point, the city would be required to take the lowest responsive bidder to do the project. Or obviously we could throw out all the bids if we decide we don't want to do it, or we could do the best value engineering where we have to run through some other steps, but essentially it would allow us to not take the lowest responsive bidder, and we would have specific criteria that maybe they're the second lowest, but because they score differently on our score sheet, we're able to take them. So that's the design, bid, build model. The important things to know about that is there is not essentially a project manager, right? That's the city is project managing the project. We would be being responsible for overseeing everything related to the project. It goes without saying, we don't have a current city administrator right now. That's a little bit difficult, a lot of it's difficult to do with the current staffing that we have. It's cheaper because you're not paying, it's potentially cheaper because you're not paying a project manager, but you do have a lot of risk because the way that it's structured, the contractor who's going to be building your project has absolutely nothing to do with the design of the project. They're just handed a set of plans and then they're told to go build it. And of course, they're bidding off of a set of plans. So anything that is missed, anything that is not correct to what's actually constructed equals a change order. And those are expensive, and those, it's difficult to know exactly how, how many changes there will be. So there's risk there because of that model.
Amanda, what kind of responsibility does someone like Wald or whoever the architect play in that? They have anything, we sign off on that?
Basically nothing.
The risk is all on us.
It's all on us.
This
Yeah, regardless of what a architect would tell you, they will not be footing any sort of bills for a change. They designed what they designed and that, so they will do a very good job of washing their hands of any and all responsibility. Now, they'll, depending upon the architect, and I'm not picking on Wolt because the model that they're proposing is not a design bid build model, they're proposing a CMA model, but they kind of say, well, we can sort of give you some guidance as you're going through the construction process, maybe, but the other problem that you have in this model is that your contractor is much better at value engineering than your architect is, but your contractor can't value engineer because they have to bid off of complete plans. So they don't have the ability to get in there and change the plans before they bid on the plans, nor can they in their bid say, well, I'd recommend that you make these 10 changes to save yourself a couple $1 million. They can't do that either. So unfortunately, this is where the design bid build process veers dramatically from the general contractor route in the private sector, right? Because the private sector, your general contractor is design engineering all the time, and they can continuously make improvements to the project as they go and say, well, we can save money here, we can do this there. That isn't the way that we can do it under the public bidding laws. So it's frustrating and it ties our hands a little bit on this, but we also have the issue of, frankly, with project management, who has the expertise to oversee a $40 million project from the city's side, because it's not the architect and it's not going to be the GC, the contractor.
And I would say that generally, for the most part, aside from your Minneapolis, your St. Paul, Bloomington, maybe Duluth, Rochester, cities aren't doing design bid build models anymore because of the astronomical risk that they take on, and because that most cities don't have staff on the payroll who have this expertise. That's why the focus is generally CMA or CMAR.
Yeah, and I would say several of those that you just listed actually are now moving to the CMAR model. So that's not to say that the design bid build process doesn't have attractive qualities. It costs. The biggest reason why a city would want to consider it is because it has the potential to be the cheapest option. It absolutely does. It probably also has the potential to be the most expensive option, right? It's got both of those because we have all the risks. So I'm gonna do CMA first, and then I'll talk about CMAR. So even though in the packet it was the other way around, the construction manager as advisor model. That is essentially what the previous administrator was structuring with Wold and Krause Anderson. And that is where hypothetically at some point soon, we would be signing a contract with Krause Anderson where they would be sort of acting as our project manager. And so they would be working with Wold to look at how they're doing the design. They would be advising us on here's where we think you can save money, here's how we would structure it. So they would be providing the management services. My understanding is between 1.5 and 2% of the total project cost is what a CME charges.
So does it you can't put that up for an RFP? I know,
That was my question.
it doesn't have to be.
Why does it
You can
have to
put
be
that
Krause
out for bid, can you not?
It doesn't have to be Krause Anderson, and we would be putting it out for bid.
Yeah.
Okay, sure.
So great question. Yes, no, we would absolutely bid for that. Or put out an RFP for that. But, the way they're obviously branding themselves together.
Yeah, sure.
And so with the CMA model, the biggest things is that they do not have any skin in the game as a CMA. So they're our advisor, and they give us advice, but when something goes wrong, they are not held accountable for any of the things that go wrong. That would be entirely the city's responsibility. All the contracts are through the city. We would have the contract with the general contractor, they don't. And in my opinion, it doesn't mitigate a whole lot of your financial risks, right? You're paying 1.5 to 2% to have somebody tell you this isn't a very good idea. Thank you for that. I'm being cheeky about it, and I don't mean to be like that way, because they definitely provide value. It does. The problem is that they're taking on any risk for that. And we saw that happen a little bit when we did our project on North Shore Trail, where we were doing the water, the extra water.
The credit.
Thing. The water thing, we all know what I'm talking about, and it kind of went a little bit sideways, and in that situation, we really sort of did have a CMA model. I don't know that that was our intention, or that, I think we kind of tripped into that, frankly, with our engineering firm. And with the city's engineering firm, and they were the advisor, and so when it actually came down to it, and there was mistakes, and there was these things, we were left holding the entire bag. Now, for the record, they were willing to do some things with us because of our existing relationship, longstanding, moving forward. I don't know that that would be the same with the KA. I don't think like that.
I highly doubt a big hitter contractor is going to say, oh, we'll go in on this, we'll go half with the guys. I don't think that that's the norm in the industry.
When this building was built, what did we use?
It is my understanding that we went with the design build option, and Aaron Parrish, the former city administrator, was basically the project manager for that project. We could go back and try to pull records and change order requests and that kind of information for council. That would be helpful, just to see how that process worked
He
out.
worked with the architect as well. That whole process there correctly, right? If I
On the
remember right.
design
Yeah.
of it, yes. Yeah.
So then there's the CMAR, and this is the construction manager at risk. And it's what it sounds like. So it's the construction manager model, similar to what Kraus does. It's just, the most significant difference is we sign contracts with them and nobody else. I mean, I realize we have the contract with Wolf, but generally speaking, we would have that contract with them and nobody else. And they have a guaranteed maximum price. So let's say that we wanted this to be 40 million and not a penny over, that's the deal. Now, they obviously get to be involved in designing the building or tweaking some things in the building to get to that dollar amount, but that is the maximum price that we will pay. They must deliver whatever it is that we've established is the project for $40 million. Any overages, they have to cover. All of the contracts with all of the contractors are with them, not with us. And obviously they offer the project management services. Well, the cost for that is approximately 2% more. So if we were paying World 1.5, we'd be paying them 3.5. We're paying World 2, or excuse me, Kraus Anderson. If we're paying Kraus Anderson 1.5, we'd be paying them 3.5 to. So it's approximately, again, running the number of 40 million, it's approximately $800,000 more. But what you get for it is very little risk. We're not managing any of the contracts. We're not managing any of the fallout, or conflicts or anything that happens with any of that. The process to get a CMAR is involved. It's long. We have to do an RFQ first. So essentially we have to do kind of like a bidding process where we create what we're looking for in our contract manager at risk. And they kind of go through if you will, like a preliminary vetting process. And then we select minimum of 2 up to 5, essentially finalists that then go through the RFP process. So it takes a long time. So this isn't something that we'd be able to get this turned around in the next couple of months. It's probably six to 9 months to sort of go from start to finish on when you would pull the trigger to when you would actually have a contract with a CMAR. So that's one thing to know. There is less transparency about the actual costs, generally speaking, because we don't care, right? It's 40 million, the end. We're not looking at anything. Go build this building for 40 million. I don't care how you get there. You have to build that building for 40 million.
Would we have any say so in the contractors that is hired?
No, they do everything.
So
So
on the
we can-
CMA one, you have say so in the contractors that are hired, is each job put out to bid?
Yeah. Yes, and so the CMAR does have to use competitive bidding, but my understanding is they don't actually use public bidding. It's a little bit different, but they do have to competitively bid the project. Part of that RFQ and RFP process, you're actually writing out the specs for what you want in your contractors. they're just going to do it for you. So you're saying, here's what we want, here's what we're requiring, here's the types of projects they have to have done, here's the experience we need them to do, or we need them to have. So there is just a ton of upfront work on the CMAR, but then there's kind of very little work on once you pull the trigger with the CMAR.
And in either case, CMAR or CMA, we don't have as a city any say so in the contractors, is what you're saying. So the general,
in the
they
same-
would.
But then
have
we're,
say so.
we're much more,
Because the contracts are with us.
yeah, and that's when we would be going with the low bid for the contractor.
Yeah.
That's where there's a little bit of
Do we have to
benefit.
take the little bit always?
Yes.
On a CMA, yes,
Yes.
on a CMAR, no.
So
And-
what about these companies that come in and just bid, I'm sorry, what about these companies that just come in and bid low to get a job and then they have all these change orders that they add on?
Yep.
That's the problem with the design bid build, and that's the problem with the CMA. That's not in the CMAR because you've structured out your requirements for what the contractor, basically, they have to be a demonstrated that. Your recommendation would be, you have to have built 10 public works buildings before, or whatever the requirements are. So you sort of filter out what would potentially be opportunistic contractors who are looking to do something like that.
And
So in the CMAR then, we still could select the contractor, the general contractor. in
No,
it.
you don't select the contractor, you just create the qualification page.
So,
are you talking about the construction?
yeah, the
manager?
construction manager, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So we would still be able to select the construction manager based on their bid.
Yeah.
So if one comes in at 25,000, 25 million, wouldn't it be nice, 25,000? And the other comes in at 35 million. We still could select the $25 million contractor. if That's what we decided to do. And then they would have to still meet their bids based on that $25 million, if that's what they say they can build it for.
Yes, provided that bid for 25 million met our RFQ and RFP checklist, because you have to do this.
It's like our
ranking.
ranking specifications.
Yeah, but it's a little bit more nuanced than that because we basically have to score them. So again, so it might be for the CMAR, you've managed 10 of these projects before, you're local, you get a point, you're this, you get a point, you're that, you get, so you do have to score them.
Okay.
And that's what you're using to determine essentially your best bid versus just who's got the cheapest dollar.
Okay.
But obviously dollar would be a part of that, right? 5 points for the lowest dollar or whatever. I'm making this up, but those are the things that would be in there. That's where there would be tremendous amount of staff time to make sure that we have those documents correct. So, because if we don't build the mousetrap correctly, we're not gonna catch the right mouse.
So for example, right now, the city of Montemita is starting CMAR project. They're reconstructing their city hall and fire station. Their timeline basically for just the CMR process alone started at the end of March for drafting the RFQ and the RFP. And they've got various different date milestones that they're looking to meet, but they're planning to award the contract late May or early June. So about 2.5 months to go through this CMAR process.
And do they talk about how big of additions they're adding on and what they're about with it all?
For
The
Like,
project that they're working on, do they say anything about how big the additions?
Oh,
they're
yeah,
adding?
all of that's, I don't have it. in
Oh,
front of
okay.
me, But
I
yeah,
was just curious how many square feet they're adding.
yeah,
what
I
the cost
don't
is.
have that in front of me, but it's all in their council packets.
Okay.
And, yeah.
One thing about the CMAR, this came out of a continuing legal education seminar that I attended, so take it with a grain of salt. But one of the recommendations, and this was from Bloomington, because they've used the CMAR model a few times now, was to try to negotiate with your contract or with your management, whatever the CMAR person is, that whatever there would be under, so if your max is 40 million and they manage to build it for 37, that you get that. Well, they're not going to agree to probably to 100%, but there could be a 50-50 split, 25-75. $1 is worth more than $0. And so there are some levers to pull in that negotiation with the CMAR to try to offset the
That
expense.
2%.
of the CMAR. Yeah.
So a general contractor, is there a way to take that risk is to take some insurance bonds out or something to cover that, or more contingency in case there is an issue? Is that something cities can do? Cause I'm assuming that's what private sector does. That's not
Yeah.
city.
Yeah, we would definitely be taking a performance bond, warranty bond, we would be taking all of those. And then it kind of, if, again, not to beat on the water situation, but there we had bonds, right? And we were fighting over the quality of their work. And as we know, ultimately, we were in a very strong position. But it required, there was a conflict that we had to resolve. I don't know that we necessarily got everything we wanted out of it. In other cities where they're having to fight with the contractor in any capacity, you're gonna split the baby somewhere.
So we go in as a city, we borrow all the money. We pay these guys when they're done, and then we start making our payments. Is that how that works?
So in terms of when we would be, these contractors are looking for their actual payment, that I'm not sure. I think that's something that can be negotiated in each model.
I mean,
terms
is
of
it,
timeline.
is it spread over years or?
No, I do
Right.
not believe that it is spread over 2 years. I believe that generally there's a percentage that they would require down, right? And then something, and then if I'm the contractor, I'm gonna be taking draws. And so that's why I was trying to understand how the levy works,
Yeah.
or the tax piece works,
Like,
because
the
we
financing.
need.
Well, just like today, we get in our
Right.
consent agenda, they request for, fourth payment on five or whatever. So I mean, they're getting paid as they go. Sure.
Because I'm not quite sure if we float that with the property tax, or with the sales tax, if we do need to have a temporary funding mechanism, because I do think we'll have a lot more money going out up front
Yeah.
than we'll have coming in, but I don't kind of understand.
How do you do that?
Yeah, so we already have sought council approval to use, I believe it's Fund 428 or 429, created as that debt service account. And so we would continue to look to fund all expenses out of that with the good faith of if we do not move forward, or when we're waiting for that sales tax, it would just be like a inner fund loan. And so then we would pay that all back once we do have that sales tax, close out that account. And that's how we would allow it to do it. And we are able to do it due to the amount of money we have in the investment accounts.
But I mean, regardless of whether or not we get sales tax levy passed, or if sales tax passed, we just do it by bonding. I mean, we're gonna have to issue bonds. At what point in this process are you guys?
As soon as I would say, as soon as a funding mechanism is determined, that's when I would start to say we should look for bonds. And then based on where things are at, also like strategically doing it, looking at interest rates too. They go up and down as the years go on based off what's happening at a federal and state level, and making sure we're not trying to take out a bond at a very volatile time in the economy.
You built into those slides of bond payments, whether it be interest or P&I in fiscal 28.
So we would start to have those conversations probably June of 27, once we have the finalized options. And then we would go through a bonding agent similar to all of our bonds are through Eller, so I'm assuming we would work with them as well. And they would come.
You may not know this off the top of your head, but we've got a lot of upcoming road projects. What other general obligation bonds for road projects or what have you are we looking at? How does that factor into those levy increase percentages?
Come on, Dave.
Well, I just know Ryan's presentation last fall, so there's $40 million worth of road construction projects that are maintenance. 12 of them. North Shore Drive, Arrow improvements, all the big collector roads.
We're not gonna do all the ones, were we?
No, but it's just on the books that are, I think the closest ones to date were North Shore Drive, and then 12, I think 12 was. Yeah, I think 16 million for North Shore Drive, and then another, and I believe or so for 12.
North Shore Drive for that same time frame of 28.
That's right, that I think it's now going to get pushed until Highway 8 gets passed Greenway, until that intersection, but at the same time.
What was those debt payments for your projections were?
But they-
Were they in the
10-year plan.
Yeah.
they were-
Yeah, they were in the 10-year plan, then they were.
They were.
So then, yes, they were. There's your good news. I was gonna get there eventually. There's your good news.
I believe they're all in 10-year plans, some of them, that the pre-funding for those projects were the two of them, I kind of got in trouble if that wasn't correctly laid out on what I ran short 11. So for this budget year through plan, we'll get those straight out, right, all those projects were in 10-year plan.
So what's staff recommend?
So backing up maybe just a little bit, we kind of jumped a little bit over the timeline for the project.
Sorry. I wanted to get to the dessert.
And I wanted to talk about dessert though. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that there's agreement from this entire council that the current facility just is not a long-term plan. I mean, there's safety issues, there's structural issues. I think the entire council has been in agreement on that something's going to need to be done.
So
If
can I?
we were to continue on the timeline that's been proposed by Wold so far, we would be looking at project completion in mid-2028. Now, if we're gonna push pause a little bit, obviously that's going to delay that timeline a little bit. You know, there's a lot of different factors that we'll have to take into consideration, but we just kind of need to hone in on what is a realistic timeline for this project, given all the uncertainties that we have at this point. Is it that we push pause until May or June and then we come back and we start making some decisions? Or do we wait till November and then do we come back and start making some decisions? But at some point, we might have to have a discussion about what might need to be done at the current public works facility. And I think Dave has the numbers around $5 million in updates and upgrades and repairs that would make that a longer term sustainable option. Not a really long-term sustainable option, but just to limp us through however long this potentially could be delayed. So I know it's getting late. I know we're tired. This has been a long meeting or workshop, but I think we need to talk about the timeline in general. And if we need to start looking at some potential options for the existing facility. Dave, do you have anything to add?
No, I feel pretty strongly you need to figure out your construction manager, how that option that you're gonna do before you even the next phase. I think regardless, you're probably gonna have a cost here. Whether it'd be great if we had that census with council, yes, we wanna go CMA, well then you have directors start preparing RFQs and RFPs and all that for that process. Both in the process. I don't, and won't argue with me and say they can be completely fine designing a building without a construction manager. I think you need that construction manager on staff or with contract, with their work, construction manager and architect working together through design development and through construction plans. I think it's gonna save everybody money. Construction managers know how to value engineer where your same point, an architect wants to make stuff look pretty, but construction managers look for functional. They're gonna know their contractors, they're gonna know not what corners you can cut, but what you can do here to save money. I do think we're at the end of the point where I don't think you can squeeze any more money out of the current design. Till you get to that next step either. I think there's room for that failure engineer to happen. Or rectangles on a box other than shaving off square footage. I don't think you're getting, you can get 100,000 here, 200,000 here, guessing that stuff, but your value engineering will happen until you get the design development. Construction plans.
What is the estimated cost of that next step to get the next step would get final visible plans, right? Like, you have an estimate of what that costs.
We've designed development was 1.8 million. That's not construction plans, that's just design development.
Yeah.
Did that include this phase or no? Because this phase was 321,000.
No, that's schematic design.
That was just schematic. Okay.
So the next step is design development, which will get you to where then you create construction plans off your last design development. That. So your process, the city would sign off schematic design, saying this is what the one building look at, and you go design development really defines it. Way down more, and you approve that, saying this is how we want the inside of the building, where the elements are gonna be, where everything's gonna be, and they take that last thing and turn it into plans that they would. And
Construction manager and the contractors.
Correct me if I'm wrong, we don't wanna go to that phase unless we know if we're gonna go CMA or CMAR, correct?
Yes, that's incredibly important.
I think I buried that on this, sorry. So in terms of next step, Dave's totally right. You have to pick your project management method before you take another step, or you're just frankly dumping more money into Wold and we don't know if it's going to be worth it.
Where would some, sorry,
Well, I was just saying, I mean, what's staff's recommendations? I mean, it sounds like either route you go, it's a hell of a lot of work. So, I mean, just honestly, what's your,
I would recommend CMAR because of the lessened risk on the city. I think that that is significant and can't be understated. There's a little bit more upfront cost with that, but I think that that upfront cost and those fees outweigh the potential risk that we're looking at with the other options.
just assuming for a second that there was consensus that we went in that direction, is just knowing that enough to say, okay, we wanna go to design because we know we wanna do CMAR? Or do we need to do that upfront work that you described took 2 or 3 months before we said, okay?
Yeah, I would have, next would be CMA. We have to figure out who that person is because they need to be in the room with Wold. Or potentially they just say, thanks, Wold, we'll take it from here, give us your schematics. And they have their own designer that they recommend, architect that they work with. I don't know. But, we wouldn't want to spend any more money on design until we have them in the room. And frankly, it's true for a CMA as well.
Yeah.
Either way, you want them in the room at this point.
Because potentially the contractor that'll be making decide on has their own architect. That could be even a lot less expensive than what Wold would charge to finalize those schematics.
Right. And honestly, I don't know, KA might have a CMAR model. I mean, they might, it wouldn't surprise me. This was just passed by the legislature in 2022. This is new, this CMAR. This was not something that was permitted for us to do because it sort of circumvents public bidding. It doesn't. It's weirdly more difficult, but it's also, it gives you a little bit weirder, it gives you a lot more freedom within a box.
Seems like we're getting, KA's bid. I mean, they're working pretty closely with Wold, so it seems to me that these numbers are kind of what they're figuring.
Yeah.
So I don't know if we need to use them for numbers, we need to get some other numbers, you know what I'm saying?
Right, I just don't know if CMA or if Wold and KA have a CMAR model, because I don't know what kind of conversations the previous city administrator would have had with them to sit, because he set it up. It's clear that he set up what he was planning on doing was a CMA model.
Sure.
That was the contract that he had assigned with Wold. Importantly, the contract that we have with Wold clearly says we are only agreeing to the schematic design at this time. We're not agreeing to anything else.
so where does Don Dyson go with Oakdale? Where would that fit in if we were to hire a consultant? I don't know what his term, what he does, but which
So
model would you use? What did Oakdale typically
So-
use?
Oakdale and Monmita have both used a CMAR model. I actually reached out to both cities today to see what their agreements were with Don, just so I can kind of get my eyes on that. I won't get Oakdale's till tomorrow, but I've
So
got,
they put another layer of, like, that next step is even more expensive, I assume, because you have a consultant.
potentially. Yeah, and with Matamita, it's about $11,000 and he's truly just consulting through this CMAR process.
So I had sent, Amanda something where someone reached out about the idea of this completely out of the box, but I really think we're at the point where we need to think out of the box. Maybe we can't, but where you have a contractor come in and just build a building and you lease it back. So maybe you own the ground, the city owns the ground, but the contractor owns the building. That happens a lot on the private side where they'll put a building right on top of a piece of ground that the building operator doesn't even own. Is that even an option in the public sector to do that? You lease it back then you're leasing it, and then after 30 years, you buy it for $1, buy it out for $1 amount.
So we would be leasing, right? They would own the property.
They would, well,
So
we
it's
would.
like a ground lease?
Only the building, we could do a ground lease to them, which we'd be paying anyway, kind of, so I don't know if that makes any sense, but for sure the building, they would put the building up and they would own the building, we would lease it back. Lease it back.
Private investors would build it. and we
Right.
just lease it. and
Right.
We have a buyout price.
You don't have, I mean, the numbers on the bonding here, when you're talking 40 million, but you're still 65 million to pay for this whole thing, we're not talking about a $40 million expense here, right? We're talking about a $65 million expense.
Okay, so in your situation, or in the example that you give, I think it's it's an interesting idea. My concern would be, obviously, could they kick us out? Could we end up losing our public works facility, right? So what does that lease look like? That has to be, an incredibly strong lease.
They're not gonna kick you out. They've got investors that they're gonna pay yield to. They're gonna say, hey, it's a public entity.
Well, we're like the best customer they could have. like,
Yeah,
PC,
I mean, it's a
you know.
unique building. It's not like there's.
They're not gonna throw it down.
It's fun.
I mean, you know, I it's all the time they pay, 4.5% yield. I think it's an interesting idea. There's a market out there. There's a lot of money.
People are looking to invest. We're like we're not going anywhere, right? We need this building. We're not going anywhere.
I'd be worried, my biggest concern is that somehow somebody, Charles Anderson perhaps, or some other entity that runs in the traditional circles would look for an argument that we are violating public bidding somehow. And so we would have to make sure that however we've structured we are not, this is not our building, this is not our project, this is not our anything. And so we would really have to make sure that we structure that correctly while still having all of the rights for the building and the property that we would need, right? That would be the balance.
Government
entities
lease,
Yes,
Washington
the
County
time.
Service Center down in Stillwater,
All
it's
the
a
time.
leased mall, they're in a mall, like, it's
Right.
like, I don't know why it's any different.
I don't know
Would you be able to participate in design work though?
that's where we'd have to be very
We would have
clear.
to, yeah,
Maybe like a
we
build-up.
give them the specs to build this to this spec right here. Like what we've designed,
That would be circumventing your full bidding law then.
That's my concern.
Publicly bid for someone to build a building on your land, that can move back.
That's designed with build. I mean, with a design bid build with a lease back provision.
I don't know.
I know, I mean, I completely understand having somebody else put the upfront bill, and then all we're in is for a probably relatively expensive lease payment, but a lease payment, right?
Yeah, we could afford, because what is the lease payments gonna be, or the bond payments, 2.5 million a year?
Yeah.
I
Yes.
mean, that's a pretty good tenant, 2.5 million a year for rents. I don't know, we're paying all the utilities and all the rest, so.
Not heard of a city doing this, but doesn't mean that it can't be done.
And maybe some other cities have done, it, just haven't heard about it.
Yeah, not a lot of cities are super creative though. I mean.
That's what you have us fight for.
I know,
We're super
no,
creative.
but seriously, they just, they get their choices and they take on their choices. To be fair.
I don't know, we're just more conscientious about our taxpayer dollars.
No,
If maybe a little bit of time, if council would agree to, I was open to that. A little bit of time into maybe seeing if that's even a thing, like.
see if that's, so. Yes, I have, an attorney who is very knowledgeable on all things public bidding. Let me reach out to them and see if they can shoot any holes in this.
So if we end up with a $2.5 million lease payment. That doesn't save us something.
Well, I'm just saying, even the budget would be 2.5, but it doesn't have to be 2.5.
I mean, it's a 6-quarter yield, for a $40 million bill, that's a yield. Coming at 5%. Sure.
The other thing that comes up sometimes when I've been asked about this building, because it's been talked about a while in the city now, and and the same thing seems to come up over and over again is what are we gonna do with the current facilities? And of course, I tell them, well, it's probably gonna be tore down and it's probably sold and probably redesigned or redeveloped. Now, we haven't talked about any of that money coming back to us as a city and how much that might be, that we could tell the taxpayers, hey, we're doing this, and yes, it's gonna cost us much, but we're also doing this, and here's how much money is gonna come back from these projects. Is there any way, or have you guys already started looking at what some of those numbers could be, so we at least could have that as part of the consideration in our conversations?
I haven't seen any research on that yet, but I'll defer to Abby and Dave. I don't know what the previous city administrator may have been doing on that.
I think the Tower Park site, there's some type of a struggle, there's EDA is there, and then there's also Parks and Recreation is there now, where you turn that into a mega park. So I don't think there's been a lot of going down that aisle. I don't think there's really been a determined, this is what goal for that land is.
Yeah, it's definitely shifted with each of the different administrators over the years, so. You're much like some of the other long range planning stuff we do, you'd have some maybe conversations with planning ED council, or we would say that land would be sold for that.
That's a good point, Kevin, because that was early on how we were trying to, offset some of this thing, not only there, but then selling the corner lot. And then the fact of getting both those properties back on the tax rolls as they come to the city. And so
That makes it.
It makes it-
different to a taxpayer.
it makes it a little bit more
And I
tolerable.
think they'd be opposed to a park if they knew that they could save money in their taxes, they go with development, so. Personally, but I mean, I know we need parks, but we've all learned parks are expensive.
Sorry, did you say splash park?
Well, what's been talked about there?
Let the water come out of the bottom of the water tower, is that?
It's right there by all those parks.
Yeah, 'cause the original schematic design, or the original space needs was space needs for a new site plus the design of a park. That was the original space needs study, that component was in there. You had to produce a design of a regional park.
Can we pivot to what you brought up, a $5 million spend? What does that get us from a longevity standpoint?
So I mean, you probably saw that on the space needs, there's, those $4.5 to $5 million on, HVAC, a new building, or not new building, new roof, then the structural, wall that's falling over, stuff like that. It just added up basically what they took of those costs to $4.5 million. None of that's been put in the CIP, just assuming that, wasn't said on any of them that the building's gonna fall down today. This is the stuff you should do to, make it safe, and if you're gonna be in there for time being. I think what Jovian brought up is, say if we're gonna push pause on this and we're gonna say we're not gonna do anything for the next 3, 4, 5 years, I think staff has to go back to that and say, okay, off this list, what do we need to get done to solve the roof doesn't collapse or this wall follow? And if the decision is we're probably not gonna do a public works building at all in the next 10 years, then that entire ball would have to go in there at least strategically or doing that.
That didn't contemplate any additional space, right?
That's just preserving what you have and basically fixing all the wrong.
Well, I think the good thing is that this council is from the beginning is pretty like, we need to do something. We think that's the right place. Doing that is not even an option, but if we are gonna hit pause, then might have to get some of the things that are really bad. Like, what do you roll, like roof, is that the worst? Like, what's the worst part of that needs the most?
Worse is the north wall or the east wall that's, starting to fall apart. Just to get that either structurally rebuilt or fortified or something to have that. I think the roof was the next in line. Then there was HVAC was a big thing just because of the air quality inside of there, bringing vehicles, built without anybody ever caring about air quality before, but. So I'd have to go through that whole entire list to parse that out, and it was kind of more of a shock, not number, but it's not all of a sudden in 2027, you have to do $5 million worth of work, which is at a total of that.
If something happened, let's say that building collapsed, we have them insured, correct?
We have insurance, yeah.
Yeah, so the insurance policy would potentially be enough to rebuild something. If we-
And pushing the building down.
No, I mean, so my question really is, so so the question is, if it's gonna take 2.5 to 3 years to build the public works building. If something happens with those buildings in the meantime, what do we do with them? If one of the buildings would collapse, let's say next year from a snow load,
Great,
we have to repair
correct.
it. Insurance will cover that, correct?
Insurance is just covering what the value of the building's at.
Do you know what that is?
Couple $100,000. I think it's actually just the shell of the building. That's all your insurance.
So do we know what it would cost to insure those for more, just in case?
We don't have that information right now.
Is
I
that
don't
my-
think you asked your insurance agent, Kay, how much do we insure you?
But I think if they came out and looked at the value of the land and that sort of stuff there, it's probably underinsured.
I'm sure it's a big value, just like all of our other properties, they devalue it over time and,
Right.
you know, where you're not insuring that much and it would definitely affect your policy. I don't.
The only reason I'm raising this is because my fear is we're gonna move forward on this public works building. We're gonna make a decision. And 1.5 years down the road, something's gonna happen. and We're gonna have to stick $2 or $3 or $4 million into those buildings. Do we have a plan that if something would happen, we could relocate public works without building a new building and just leave it down if that's what happens?
I think the answer is no.
Okay. Could we come up with something or a strategy that we could use in case something had happened?
Fit this up for some cubes and a few more tables if you're great at.
Yeah.
Put up a lead.
Well, could we lease a man garage down by the airport or another airport hangar or something like that? Is I guess what.
You know,
I'm
maybe
getting
you
at.
find some commercial space like the big space on Wetland Avenue, temporary, maybe
Right.
off the office out of here or work out of here, but trucks are there. or
Because wouldn't you
something.
agree it would make no sense to rebuild those buildings?
Yeah, yeah.
So to me, what I was gonna
And,
say.
and that's the fear. That's why this seems like it's getting pushed because something like that could happen. And that's why we're at where we're at. Maybe we're pushing a little too hard. But if we're gonna pause, I don't think we take too long a pause.
I would agree.
That's the,
I would
That's the
agree.
deal.
I think. Dave, you disagree with me if you want or chime in, but I think that we have Wool back next week and they present to us their updated schematic design based on council's direction. The 30th. And you don't jump right into design development. I just think we're too premature. I think the tail is wagging the dog a little bit on this. And I think that's where we just take a little bit of a pause that will we get to May, see what happens
Yeah.
with the legislative action. Find out what's going on there. Then we come back to council, Amanda can do some research on this leaseback option. We can bring more information, but I think between now and then, there needs to be a lot of consideration given to the other options for product management as well.
Would it be helpful if you had a couple guest visitors, like a CMAR person and a CMA person, so you could talk to, or so that, they could do their spiel? I mean,
I think we need to, because it sounds like we need to make that decision before we ever get to design, even if we wait till May.
Agreed.
So we need to get whatever we need in front of us to be able to make that decision.
and obviously we'd be just picking from somebody who's doing it right now, right? Not saying that they're the person that, but at least it's a representative who they can speak to the process from a insider perspective.
If Don hired by Matamita to help do all the front end work of getting that,
Yes, yeah,
What's-
this contract's very specific.
once they get that figured out, that's the scope of
Cities
his work.
covers, yeah.
Yeah. I like the fact you brought up even if the legislature approves this thing, we feel like we haven't had the runway to give the public delay the funding, from public vote until next year, like, that's not a bad option. Doesn't mean we have to wait a year to do it, it just means that we either decide to spend a lot of money on our levy or not.
Well, we've been trying to gear up a little bit to build something to give to the public or show them what we're at now with our public works facility. Kind of explain, this is why we need to do this, it's because the facilities we have now are in shambles and are not, we're throwing a bunch of money at it.
Which
So
leads to the last bullet point I wanted to touch on tonight is that public engagement we know that council did approve us to engage with Goff Public to start getting word out about the need for a public works facility. Incredibly behind on that. Dave and I are actually meeting with Goff Public tomorrow, just kind of for a kickoff meeting. But it might be really beneficial if we have a subcommittee of this council who is really engaged in those efforts and giving input into what that public engagement looks like. And so I just want to throw it out there to see if there's any interest in that. I don't anticipate it to be a big time commitment, but to get that direction from council as we're moving, because we are so far behind the ball, I think it would be really helpful and it would lessen the delay of getting that message forward. So. Anyone? Options? I mean, I know you
I
guys
think
are.
council member Erickson has got these billboards all over town.
Yeah.
You really don't need for that. Go on. He's understanding about that. How are you? Yes, no?
Just want to throw otherwise, I mean, staff will obviously continue moving that forward.
I, you're looking for two,
I think two would be,
you say, I'm fine with that, I mean, it's. We all get a little bit of, feedback, but I get a lot, probably more feedback, so I think being able to,
kind of guide that.
yeah, I'd like to
And that's
be
what we're
involved
looking
in that.
for. It's just,
Yeah.
the more hands-on guiding from council on this so that we're getting the message. Right?
Yeah, it's a good idea.
All right, so we got one taker.
Two takers.
Two?
Yeah.
All right.
Like those guys.
No, I'm really glad to be involved, but we got two and that's, I don't think you need more than that.
You have more than that.
Yeah, no, two is our max here.
But,
So I think what.
I mean, I'm envisioning a
Tomorrow.
scale month.
Yeah. So tomorrow, Dave and I will meet with Goff just to kind of get that preliminary conversation going, just kind of feel them out a little bit. Then we'll bring you guys in, but we won't shoot you that meeting invite. Oh, it's almost 10 o'clock tonight. We won't put that on your plates for tomorrow. Just keep you updated though. Okay, so just to kind of round this all out so we can all go home. We'll be back on Monday. Present again on schematic design, but we're not gonna move forward yet with agreeing to jump into design development. So we're gonna push pause for a little bit. Amanda's gonna gather some more information about the lease back option. We're gonna gather some information, perhaps bring some folks in to talk about CMA, CMAR, what that looks like. And maybe we can even lean on Don for a little bit for that too. At high level talks with him and he's willing to just present some information. Once we know what's gonna happen at the state, we can have some more in-depth conversations hopefully in May, but perhaps into June, and then really develop a plan to move forward from that point.
And I think if Don is willing, I think you're better off getting someone to come and talk to you who has been through the CMA or CMR. I mean, Kenny or Vincent or Jim, they'll do either one.
They'll do either one.
I mean, we've met with some of them before, they say, well, we'll do whatever the city wants to do, so I think Don will be valuable because he's done the CMA and the CMAR and maybe another name your city administrator, name rather that would tell you, here's the great things that work. I mean, kind of like you went through the pros and cons, but for somebody to actually tell you, yes, this went really well, or yeah, I would never do this again because of this, or here's the issues with that. Like bringing in a construction manager, they're just gonna say, oh, whatever one you want pay us for.
Yeah. For sure. All right, thanks everyone, and it was a long night, but we had to have both these conversations, otherwise, and appreciate everyone's time and effort, and be easy on us in that department head meeting.
That's like.
Did you cancel?
So tomorrow, we don't need a motion to adjourn or anything on a work session.
No, we're calling at 9:35.
Hey, everyone.
Everyone. Thank you.
Oh, of course. Hey, I forgot to mention,
Thank you, Ellie.